Before we actually move on to approval of the agenda, I just would like to make a couple introductions. First off, for people who may not have been at Contois or were not at the last meeting or don't quite remember, our two student representatives have both shown up this evening, Henry Prine and Xander Long. Henry's on the end, Xander's on further in. I'll leave you to catch everybody's names again when we go through roll call. But also tonight, taking over as minute taker is Liz LaRue, here on my right.
Welcome, Liz.
Welcome. And then that, I think, at least sitting around the table tonight is the rest is the usual cast of characters. First item on the agenda is the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Motion from Linda Della Duca, seconded by Patrick Halliday. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Or, yes, Liz.
I would like to, do we take minutes off if we want to discuss them? Or do we just make the motion to amend?
You would do that at the consent agenda. You would ask to pull minutes.
So I would like to pull the minutes of, it's a little confusing, but I think the minutes, well, definitely the minutes of the retreat. That's
a
one.
separate line item.
And then the minutes of April 2nd.
Just as a point of order, you would actually do that when we come to the consent agenda item. We
Oh, I
would,
thought we were on the consent agenda.
no, we're just on the main agenda for the board meeting.
Oh, I thought you just moved the consent agenda. Sorry.
Nope, sorry.
Gotcha.
This is, the beginning would be just the agenda for the evening tonight, and then
And then
consent
on
agenda
the
will be a separate, yeah, sorry.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. Any other amendments? Hearing none, all in favor of the agenda, say aye. All opposed? The agenda is approved. At this point in time is when we ask and offer time for the public to come forward and make comment on any particular issue that affects the school district. It's not a time in which the board will engage in debate or conversation, but it is a time for us to hear from the public and potentially at the end, if there's time or an interest, provide a small amount of reflection on the comments that we've heard this evening. Tonight, the only name right now on the list for public comment is Martha Lang. So, Martha?
Hello, my name is Martha Lang, and I live at 138 Colchester Avenue. And I have a couple of questions that I think are very important that the school board answer before they attempt to move forward with the land transaction. I'd like some clarification on what is 148 Colchester Avenue versus 150. When you call, sometimes people say, well, 148 is the school building and 150 is the land. In the historical records, the only reference I can find to anything on Colchester Avenue related to the school is the deed of transfer in 1894, which references 150 Colchester Avenue. I have it right here. So it's only 148 that's ever referenced under the land deeds. The first reference I ever found about 150 Colchester Avenue was in the deed of 1980 when Trinity College bought 2 acres in the building on Fletcher Place. And this is where it becomes very important for you people to identify what it is you're selling. In this transaction, it says a parcel of land with the Ira Allen building located thereon, meaning in Fletcher Place. But when I look at your handouts, it appears that you're selling the Ira Allen building. But the Ira Allen building, as referenced in the land deeds, belongs to the University of Vermont. Do you understand where we have a conflict? I don't think UVM would appreciate you selling their building. Now, further reference, I went down and I did a search of the parcels. There are like plats down at City Hall. And I think I'm going to have you look at this. It's very, very important that you identify what it is you're selling, the address, and who owns what. At 148-150 Colchester Avenue, the building on that lot of land, according to City Hall, is the Early Essential Education Building. That's at 150 Colchester Avenue. But I have not seen in anything of your brochures anything about the Early Essential Education Building. You've always referenced it, the Ira Allen Building. But the Ira Allen Building is at 34-38 Fletcher Place. So I think we need to identify what building we're selling, and do you own that building on that lot of land is my question. And also down at City Hall, which you'll find very interesting, is there's a parcel of land in the tax records identified as 148 Colchester Avenue. In the tax records at City Hall, there is no parcel of land identified as 150 Colchester Avenue. So we've got to identify the location of the land, the address, the building that we're selling, and do you own the building on that lot of land identified as 148, 150 Colchester Avenue? I hope that you'll take, I didn't have time to make this. If you'll look at this, you can pass this around.
Would you be able to leave this for us?
No, I can't. It's my only copy. What I'm going to do is go over to Kiko's and make some copies and email them to decision makers. My concern is that two things. You've labeled the building at 148 Colchester, 148, 150 Colchester is the Ira Allen Building, when according to that map, it's the Early Essential Education Building. At 34-38 Fletcher Place, that's the Ira Allen Building. But what's even more troubling than all of this is that some of the permits for the Early Essential Education Building are being pulled and paid for by 34-38 Fletcher Place, which is a UVM-owned building. The vent on the top of that building, when you look down into 148, 150 Colchester Avenue, that vent on the top, I couldn't find a permit under the building inspectings. So Bill Ward very nicely helped me. It was pulled under 34-38 Colchester Avenue. That's a very expensive vent up there. Did UVM pay for it? They pulled the permit. They closed it out. Who owns what and who's paying for what? And what are we selling? Are we selling the Early Essential Education Building? What is the address? The first time I saw any information about 150 Colchester Avenue was in 1980.
Martha, typically we do have 3-minute limits on public comment, which I've extended a bit here. Could you wrap up?
I certainly can. It's very important that we know what we're selling.
What I would say is this at this point, given our general restrictions on time limits and so forth.
I didn't know there was a time limit.
Yeah, sorry. With comments like this, we try to take these type of issues to our lawyer, and if there are others, if you could present them to the board, or even make a PDF of the documents as well to forward to us.
Oh, yes, I'd be happy to work with you in any way that I can. The only thing that I hope for is that the city of Burlington is the beneficiary of all of this, the city taxpayers. That's all that I'm concerned about are the city taxpayers. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. No, I appreciate the comment.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Thank you.
It's over here right now, we'll get it.
Take your time. I'm in no hurry.
I guess at this point too, I totally steamrolled right past the roll call.
Which Liz needs.
Yeah, Liz, I was wondering if you could do the roll call please for us, since I forgot to do that.
Sure. Catherine Chasen. Liz Curry. Here. Linda Deladuca.
Here.
Jill Evans.
Here.
Rebecca Grimm.
Here.
Patrick Halliday.
Here.
Greg Jenkins.
Here.
Erin Fonnefeld.
Very good. But not here.
Alan Madsen.
Here.
Bernie O'Rourke.
Here.
Keith Pillsbury. Miriam Stoll. Here. So I get that right. Ben Truman.
Here.
Meredith Woodward King.
Here.
Xander Long,
Here.
Henry Prime,
Here.
And then
Okay.
just
So
send
we
it
have-
around, no, you don't have to worry about them, but send it around for people to sign and then it'll come back here.
At this point is the board report. I have a few items that I wanted to comment on. And then if anybody else has other items they'd like to bring up at this point. The first thing I would like to bring to the board's attention is affirmative recruitment trainings that Nikki has scheduled. I don't know if everyone was copied on the emails, but I just would like to remind board members that if at all possible, please try to make one of these. Or if enough board members can't, we will try to find another time, as this is something we have committed to. And we had talked about the affirmative recruitment trainings being a good form of diversity training for the board. The times are July 30th from 1 to 3 and August 12th from 10 to 12. And both of them, I think, if I understand correctly, are going to be in the large conference room at the Ira Allen, 150 Colchester Ave. And admin, principals, and teachers will also be participating. So these are not set up just for board, but could make that training and be good. I also had some other possibilities.
And please RSVP,
Yeah, please RSVP.
because we won't hold it if we don't have a certain number.
I would like to make it the 12th, so I think they need to have at least 3 people for.
I'm going to 12, so we're up to
So
2.
we're up to 2 at least already for the 12th. And you can contact Chelsea, she is keeping the RSVP list on that. Second thing I wanted to bring to the board's attention is an update on the situation involving the teacher and the alleged relationships with a student. There is an internal investigation that is going on. We have been getting status updates, and there are still steps being taken in that process at this point in an ongoing investigation. Beyond that, there's not really anything that can or to be reported at this time, nor would there be anything that would be reported in an executive session either. So just giving that update at this point. Third thing I'd like to mention to everybody relates to the real estate transactions. I think as you all know, I did send a letter to the City Council asking them to delay at least a month on putting them forward to the board, to the full council for approval. A large part of that came as we began to look at the final lease with UVM related to Taft, and I think there was a different understanding about how close we were and some of the not just detailed terms, but some fairly significant terms related to the lease and whether or not they conformed with the interpretation by the courts of what was necessary for the building. I think there was also some concerns about certain economic risks that we didn't feel were appropriate either for the city or the district to be taking on. And so while the conversations with UVM are certainly going forward and very, I think, upbeat and everybody's optimistic, I think it just does take a bit more work before we're willing to go to the city council. And we do look at these transactions as a package, and we also said to them, therefore, we're not going to ask for 2 out of 3, anything like that. We really want to do this all together. In this whole process, I would also like to thank both Miriam and Bernie in particular, who have done a lot of work in helping shape some of the responses to concerns that we've had, as well as being involved in helping present around the community. And I probably have missed some other folks who have been involved as well, but I think it's important that we are able to stay in conversation with City Council, with the city, to keep everyone aware of what we're doing. I think that this is the important, it's an important time for this. Many parties are involved in this negotiation, and it is something where there isn't a public portion of it, which is going on right now, and I think we've been doing, I think we've been addressing the primary concerns that in particular have been coming from the city government and from the public. There was a walkthrough last Thursday that I understood a number of board members attended. I don't think we had any city council members attend, but, you know, if your council members suggest to you that they might want to see more of the building or understand this better, we can certainly arrange for further events like that. I think those are the primary things I wanted to say from the chair. I don't know if anybody else had any questions related to anything I've spoken about or had any further reports. Miriam?
I wondered, from going through, you were one of the people that went through the building, right?
I did not go with the tour, but I have been through the building a couple different times. I think Meredith, Bernie,
I'd just love to hear from
Linda?
anyone who went through the building, like when you went through it, did it confirm your feeling it was a good deal? Like any,
Absolutely.
what did you see that was?
It's extremely well taken care of. It is very solid. It has concrete, walls, beautiful tin ceilings, beautiful woodwork, beautiful floors. It has a nice stage, backstage, a gym. There was a principal on the tour as well. Bobby Riley, if you remember, playing basketball at the City Youth League. So it just has a lot of Burlington history in it too. It's just, the parking is great. There's a giant green space. I think what I'm so excited about is that it's in the heart of the Old North End, and having any school officials or anyone coming to the Old North End is just going to make the benefit the neighborhood. So.
When we were beginning these discussions, there was a timeline in terms of both the approval process, but then community discussions and then construction, et cetera, et cetera. If this is bumping a month to go to city council, does everything bump a month later?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, UVM has been the one who's had the primary interest about wanting to get into their spaces, earlier in effect by, even though we had worked with them that even if we made the sales, we would be able to stay in some of our space at least through the year until, effectively after the sale. UVM had really been pushing on that timeline, and that's been something that we've said back to them. You understand it, the timeline has been in part driven by some of your needs. So right now, I don't know other than to say UVM is in the middle of the transactions, and I think are aware. We've also been in conversations with the parties that are representing St. Joseph's, the building there, and while they want things to move forward, they understand it's a large multi-party transaction and have expressed a fair amount of patience. So I think it would get very tricky to do. It's getting trickier to move as quickly as we talked about. I think that's true.
I just would hate to abbreviate any public
I gotcha.
comments
Okay.
about what is or isn't happening with that building because of UVM or our timeline. I want to be sure that it is an intentional process with stakeholders in the community.
And Jean just said she might want to speak on behalf
Yeah,
of the
I'd be happy
administration.
to. I think we're getting close. I will say that the very I felt it was already an abbreviated process that Terry had designed, actually had a starting public comment in August, and the reality is the public really isn't listening to us in August. There are many other things going on for families and getting ready for school, so September is more appropriate. So I don't think it really needs to. I think if we go through in August, no. If we don't go through in August, which is a very real possibility, then I think we might need to revisit the timeline with UVM so that we have a timeline for a public piece. And one thing, if I may, correct that Martha said last night at City Council, if she's listening, UVM is allowing us to stay in Taft and Ira Allen lease-free, rent-free during that year. I think last night it was said in reverse, but so we might have to extend how long we can stay there so that we have time to do our process. And we wish to do our process before we do much with some of the walls that might have to go up or things like that.
Any other questions or comments? Anything from board members?
I have one.
Jill?
Just a heads up that the annual Vermont School Board Association regional meeting for the Franklin Grand Isle region will be on Thursday, October 3rd. I think it's traditionally started at 5 o'clock at night. I don't know if that's the case, but I can forward it to you if you want to pencil in your calendars. It's been a meeting that's conflicted with our board meetings in the past, so they've tried really hard to schedule it so that it didn't conflict with any board meetings in this region. And one of the things that happens at that meeting is elections for the regional president and vice president to the Vermont School Board Association for that region, and I'm not going to be running to be president, so there will be, I mean, you have the opportunity, even though there's currently a president and a vice president, anyone can be nominated to run for one of those positions, but I'm definitely not running, so if anyone's interested, I can fill you in on what it entails and that sort of thing.
Jean?
Do you happen to also have the date for the VSBA, VSA Fall Conference that people could put ahead? Not to put you on the spot, because I don't, so do you happen to?
I think I didn't write it down because I'm not going to.
I believe it's the end of October, but that's okay, we can get it out.
And the regional meeting is usually in Winooski, is that right?
We've held it at Winooski High School for the last 2 years. I'm not sure if it was.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Anything else? At this point then, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Collins for the superintendent's report.
Thank you. And I'll ask you to sign that and give it back to me. So I have a few updates for you. In diversity and equity, and you'll be able to see these full reports on next week's Diversity Equity Committee page. But just briefly, we are in the process of hopefully finalizing our hiring. You do have a consent agenda tonight with some new hires on it. I do have an interview at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, and I think 2 more tomorrow. So it might be helpful for the board to consider authorizing the Finance Committee to approve consent agenda hires before your August meeting. I'm giving you an update. Just an update. So you don't have it under diversity equity. But I brought it under diversity equity because the diversity and equity, lost my train of thought there, because Nikki is working closely with myself and Leslie Coulomb, a principal, and Victor Prusek on this hiring process, because through her first time through our affirmative recruitment process, we are finding it, fairly cumbersome, as we know, and she has some new ideas, and we're looking at changing it, keeping it as an affirmative, intentional affirmative hiring and recruitment, but changing the process itself. So you'll be hearing some more about that. She has provided 11 trainings in affirmative recruitment between April and June, and you are encouraged to attend the July 30th or August 12th trainings. We extended the posting for the Director of Diversity, Education, and Engagement to July 15th, as we didn't feel that we had enough applications in yet. It did close yesterday, and the search committee met today to start to review the applications. We did complete a new teacher survey, meaning the new teachers who were hired last year were asked at the end of year to complete a survey to give us some feedback on what we could have done better or what we did wonderfully, but generally we're asking, what do you wish we could have done more of? And general feedback is that there needs to be more formalization of our mentoring program, particularly in the areas of diversity and English language learners. And so Nikki and Stephanie are working on this together this summer to look at these 2 issues. We have recently entered an advertising agreement with NEMNet, Minority Recruitment, a national resource organization that's committed to helping schools and organizations identify and recruit minority teachers, administrators, and coaches. And we're renewing our agreement with the Teachers of Color magazine, and right now considering agreements with HBCU, Liz, I'll just hand this to you, Connect, and Diversity Executive magazines. We also submitted an application for AmeriCorps members in conjunction with the Partnership for Change, hoping that the AmeriCorps program can help us fill some of the gaps, as well as provide a learning experience for AmeriCorps members. We have done this in the past, and Nikki has agreed to fill our position on the We All Belong Advisory Committee of the city that looks over, that supervises the AmeriCorps program. Our ELL, English Language Learner Program, summer school programming is underway. We also, this year, for the second year in a row, our ELL content specialist provided training to our summer school teachers to make sure that because our summer school teachers sometimes also come from the outside, to make sure that our summer school teachers also are prepared to help our students in the summer school program, the elementary summer school program called SOAR. We also are offering 3 English classes and 4 math classes for ELL students who are interested during the summer, and a 6-week program with beginner and intermediate ELL classes, as well as a 9-10 grade class in English prep. About 30 ELL students are participating in the high school program. And at the middle school program, the Sarah Holbrook Center is offering a new arrivals program to beginning English language learner students in grades 6 to 8. So we're really trying to expand the year as best we could for all of our ELL students. The district, we're continuing to work on the commitments we made to Parents for Change, and in particular, we held a couple of meetings in June with particular communities to test the new grade reporting tool, which you can find on the Partnership for Change website. And we found all kinds of bugs in it, but that's why we asked for a pilot group of parents to come in, help us test it, apply to their own students. And the intention of this tool, if you remember that commitment we made, is for particularly our new American parents to be able to understand what a grade means. So what, my child got an A, is that going to get him to college? Where is my child on the track to finishing high school, going into college? And it's a tool that helps you convert the report card you get into, or apply it to a continuum of learning type tool. Something we're designing, and as I said, you can see the current tool on the Partnership for Change website. We've also been participating in receptions and resettlement meetings with the state refugee coordinator, Denise Lemereau, and then I met personally with Judy Scott from the Vermont Refugee Resettlement Center. And it looks like the number of refugees that are going to be resettled this coming year are about 325, which is about what they've been doing each year. There was some talk that they were going to increase it next year, but it looks like the number will come in about the same as this year. And I think that's it for diversity and equity that I can tell you right now. Any questions on that one? Ooh, questions? Bernie?
The
Do you want to hand this to Liz?
Yeah.
the resettlement program, how does that translate?
To what we get?
Yeah, like last year.
No idea.
Last year.
I don't have the data in front of me to tell you how many new students we took in last year. When the resettlement program puts in the request to the Office of Refugee Resettlement saying that this community can take 325 people, we don't know ages, kids. I could find out the information, what we took in this year for you, or even the trend. It might be interesting to know the trend over recent years. But we don't know until they arrive how many of those are school-age children, or what school background they might come with. Down the, Liz, was your hand up? Marion? There was somebody on that side. Marion.
So I'm not quite sure if this is the forum to ask this question, and maybe it's a diversity and equity committee question, I don't know. But, you know, we have a huge focus on recruitment. I'm assuming all good teachers, but in particular good teachers of color. And I'm wondering, do we have any internal program to bring up, for example, paras of color who might be interested in going to school? Because one of the things I've heard is that, you know, we actually do have some diversity in our staff, but it tends to be on the para level as opposed to the teacher
Right.
level. So I'm curious if that's something.
This
we consider.
district began well over a decade ago, what was called the Coming Home program, which was exactly for that reason. Coming Home went statewide and is now called the Vermont Teacher Scholarship Program. And I believe I'm still sitting on the board. It's kind of dormant right now. But that program is specifically, and we still largely, you know, are very involved with it. But that program is specifically for that reason. If there is a minority candidate who may be interested in teaching, that the Vermont Teacher Scholarship Diversity Program, VTSDP, will actually provide support, both funding support through scholarship funds, as well as mentoring support, as well as placement upon completion of the program. And so we're still very involved with them, and I know that I personally have connected about 4 or 5 people with that program. About three of them we are now employing, and one we did employ, and she went on to your district. So your district is now employing her. So that is in place currently.
I think that sounds fabulous, and I wonder if there's more we could do as a district to supplement the state level issues, because it just feels to me that there's a huge expense in going out to recruit people from the outside.
Right.
If we took that same amount of money and focused it in on even a few candidates, we would increase our percentage of teachers of color, notably. So I'm not sure what to do with that, but I just wanted to throw that out there as a thought.
I'll take that to Nikki. There was one on this side of the table?
Same question Bernie had. So
Oh, good.
We're good.
Any other questions on diversity, equity? Okay. Partnership for Change update. There's been quite a bit happening. We had a very successful School Development Institute, SDI, on June 17th to 21st. That's a week-long seminar for teachers from both Burlington High School and Winooski High School. And that institute was focused on teacher learning tied to the proficiencies, with a report out session of the end where the week's learning was shared. We had an end of the year celebration dinner. About 130 people, including some of you, thank you very much, joined us at the community barn in the Intervale to celebrate the success of our first year. And to cap off the evening, we organized a learning walk with representatives from our many grants stationed around the barn and available to talk about their programs. And several of you, again, I did see there. Thank you for that. Right now, as we speak, Amy Mellencamp, Hal Colston, and about 20 Winooski and Burlington teachers, students, parents, community partners are in Estes Park, Colorado, visiting the Eagle Rock School and Professional Development Center. And there is an agenda on the Partnership for Change webpage. From here, we have 6 Burlington High School teachers, Amy and Herb Perez, on that trip. On July 8th to 10th, we held our new Fellows Orientation and Training, which included a day of communication with Jane Feinberg, who is a communication specialist paid for by Nellie Mae. Burlington and Winooski School Board chairs, administrators, some select teachers were invited to participate, and the new fellows are now on board. And if you check the blog on the webpage, they will post and introduce themselves. We are making changes in this coming year's implementation teams. We strongly encourage board members. I know that one of the things board members have said is that you're feeling a little bit removed from what's happening there, and this is a great place to dig in. So participating, if it's possible, I understand that you're already devoting a lot of time. There is one implementation team meeting per month. There are 5 teams altogether, and the location alternates between Burlington High School and Winooski High School. And there's opportunity for cross-team collaboration. I do have a schedule, which is also on the website, or I could get it out to you if you're interested. Hal and Lindsay and our Partnership for Change folks are moving into the upstairs of the Murray Street house that you bought last year. Downstairs will be used, current use plan is for SA, some Sustainability Academy use. So they will be upstairs in that house, which gives them a little bit more opportunity to branch out if they need to a little bit. And also gets them out of central office, which, since Partnership for Change is a shared initiative, kind of helps mentally that they aren't a Burlington School District only initiative, even though we own the house. Any questions on Partnership for Change that I may or may not be able to answer?
I had one additional comment which came from the communications board. Sarah Feinberg?
Jane Feinberg.
Jane Feinberg.
Give that to-
Jane had asked me if, or perhaps marketed to me, that some board training surrounding communication, particularly related to Partnership for Change, might be some good board learning. I'm putting it out there. To get response, doesn't have to be at this meeting tonight, but whether or not folks thought that might be helpful. I put it out to the board for your input to think about if it sounds, oh, that would be great. I think that there was a certain approach to messaging that Jane brought to the idea of how do you make changes in a public setting, with public institutions that tend to move glacial-like, without kind of totally alienating a community, which was sort of the theme of her approach to the communications.
Anything else from you on Partnership for Change? Xander and Henry, if I may ask, are either of you sitting on a Partnership for Change committee or implementation team? Are you? Which one are you on?
Proficiency-based learning.
Oh, great. So, Xander, I don't know if any of it interests you or not, but I'll certainly connect you, and maybe Henry can help me connect you as well, because a huge piece of the Partnership for Change initiative is about student voice. And so you understanding more about Partnership for Change will help with the student voice here. That's all right. Okay, so okay if I move on? All right. At the, was it finance? No, at the planning committee meeting last week, I believe, or recently.
2 weeks ago.
Thank you. Kathy Owell from the Sarah Holbrook Center came to the board and explained that due to a variety of funders giving less money than usual to the summer school program, that the Sarah Holbrook Community Center summer school program, World Academy is, or no, I'm sorry, the middle school program is short about $18,000. And she expressed concern about an inequity of funding because she explained that that program serves about 240 middle schoolers and our elementary program, SOAR, serves about 240 elementary students, and we do fund that more fully. I think that her question is probably a board level question about values and priorities, et cetera. However, she asked specifically for the board to find the $18,000 in the gap. And I had explained that night that we were already on this. We already knew about this. We knew that their budget had gone over, as well as there was some funding shortfalls. So Jeff has informed me that we are replacing the gap. We actually projected the gap to be 15,000. Kathy came and said it was 18,000. Our latest knowledge is it's 22,000. And we are able to fill this gap through our 21st century funding, our Burlington Kids funding. I don't want to be specific about 21st century because some of it might be local. So through our Burlington Kids funding, because we were able to increase revenue with a new outreach coordinator who was able to double his outreach efforts so that more families receive support subsidies. And also our quality improvement efforts allowed us to create a substantial bonus for kids who qualify for the program. So as a result of the work that we've been able to do to increase revenue in the after-school program during the year, we are able to provide their shortfall, which is currently 22,000, to keep the program. I say there, but I want to point out it's our kids. So Sarah Holbrook is providing this program for our kids this summer. So we are going to meet that, and we also are going to have conversations with Sarah Holbrook in general as we go forward about how to improve our communications in the budgeting process so that overruns are not unexpected. You know, we don't have unanticipated overruns or shortages that we need to cover. So I was asked to give an update tonight, even though not all of you were there, and that's the update. So I'm sure there are questions. Meredith?
So I have talked to Kathy about this, and do they still receive money from the Burlington School Foundation?
Well, it's interesting. The new executive director, or president, I guess, president of Burlington Students Foundation was there.
Students.
Students. Did I say students? Okay.
No, whatever it's called.
It's
sorry.
students now.
Okay.
And yes, but they only got a third of what they had been receiving.
Because
so that was one of the shortfalls of funding.
the reason I bring that up is because as a parent, I've received the literature about signing up for some of these camps. I think this speaks to some of the issues that Patrick has raised
Yes.
over the year regarding who can pay for after school, and the fact that some of us can afford to pay, but we're never asked to. And you know, my child was in a sailing camp that I had paid full price for, and then people of similar economic means ended up in the camp and they got there for free through our middle school summer programs. And I felt like, okay, something's wrong with this picture. And I just hope that there are economic, that people who can afford these camps are not just getting into the camps for free, is what I want to say.
Right.
Which I think might be happening. I think Kathy is speaking about the kids who are definitely qualified and need,
Right.
funding for the camps. But I think there needs to be more attention to that.
Linda?
I think Sarah Holbrook probably could use some help on their finance things, because this is not the first time over the years. I've been connected with them off and on for 20-some years, and I think they could use some support in getting it together better, and also maybe some ideas on how to go out and raise significant amounts of money rather than small amounts of money. I mean, I think what they do is great. But it's sort of not quite caught up to the times, I think. It's been around a long time.
Any other questions on the summer school funding?
Yes, one thing that we had possibly suggested, and related to I think what Meredith said, was even just putting into the brochures to parents. Here's the full cost of this particular program. If you feel if you enjoy this program and you feel comfortable paying, we would appreciate it, because we are entirely grant funded otherwise. Has there been any follow up on an
There
idea
has.
like that?
I would like that discussion to take place at the finance committee.
Okay.
That Jeff has actually done quite a bit of work on that, and I didn't feel that we were prepared to have a full discussion about
Okay.
that here. But it seemed like an appropriate place to go might be finance committee.
Okay, so it's being discussed. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know this is slightly off topic. It's picking up on what you were just saying, Alan, and a little bit what Meredith was saying. I'm just going to say that I think it's a really good idea to make that an optional funding, and as soon as it starts to become, well, some people pay and some people don't pay, then it becomes an issue of,
Yep.
well, this is something that we're providing to you, and that's when you start to deal with the issues of cuts on it.
Okay.
Sociological.
All right. We recently had as well, July 5th, the Burlington High School Accessibility Tour, and I also want to thank Miriam for her incredible organizational skills. As we look ahead at her board term, we need to rely on that often, and communication skills, but in helping us pull this together. We did have the mayor, the mayor's assistant, approximately 20 members total of both the accessibility community as well as internal staff members. Joel Fitzgerald, our co-director of facilities, myself, Amy Mellencamp, Ben Johnson, the new high school assistant principal who's going to be in charge of special education. Dylan was out of town, so but Ben was there. I think it was a successful tour. It didn't end on time. That's always a good sign, because people weren't eager to leave. I think that there were many truly shocking things about how inaccessible this building is at times. We had 2 students with mobility issues who were willing to lead the tour for us, and 1 or 2 other students with mobility issues who went along the tour. And I think it was an eye-opening tour. I really appreciate that the mayor gave of his time and experienced it. He rode in a wheelchair, I rode in a wheelchair, and there were a few others as well who did. Not to say that riding in a wheelchair in any sense of the word gives you knowledge of what it's like to experience this building, but a simple example of even that short stint in a wheelchair. How do you go up to one of our doors in the hallway and open the door and get in? Throughout the building, we don't have accessible, we do to enter the building in the front of the ramp, but once you're in the building, you're opening a door or someone's opening it for you. So just even little things in that short amount of time gave us a sense of how difficult accessibility is in this building, although it in no way replicates what people deal with day after day. So thank you, Miriam, and I hope some some good thoughts come out of this. Any questions on that for Miriam or me or Bernie? Meredith?
Is there a way to catch up on that? I wasn't able to go. I'm really interested in the whole issue. I know that kids have had to go outside in bad weather to access parts of the building, for example. And the lock issue came up this year. But I just wondered, is there a way that we can fill in?
Maybe a report at the next ITC meeting? We could summarize some of the points that.
The Accessibility Committee at the city has asked me to do a summary. I did some exit polling when people came out, and I said I would write up something, so I'm happy to write it up and send it around if people want just a summary.
Yeah, that would be
Would that be? I
helpful.
mean, it won't have all the different areas of the high school that don't work. It will have more sort of general themes, because I didn't take notes on all that. But if that would be helpful.
Greg?
Greg?
I'll give you a real quick update on it. You don't want to have accessibility issues at the school. It would be very, very challenging. I was surprised at, especially going from building to building. Some of them were very difficult, and you have to go a long route to get from place to place. I was surprised. I'm very glad I went.
My wife also reflected on just the research that's done on the impact of learning on kids with mobility problems, just because of the physical effort they have to put out during the day, and the impact that has on learning.
Did you have anything else, or are there any other questions or comments on any other issue for the superintendent right now? Seeing none, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. Just so, point of order, we would normally ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda and then look to see if there are items to be pulled to look at separately. So, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Commissioner O'Rourke, seconded by Commissioner Truman. I'm sorry. And I'm going to go to Liz first here for items to remove from the consent agenda.
Thank you. I'd like to remove the board retreat minutes of 6/20/13 and the diversity and equity minutes of 6/25/13.
And are those two removals to be for review to redo? Is that basically?
They're for questions and modifications.
Okay. So then I think okay. So we'll remove those two, and then I think what we do is just go back, have them modified, and then bring them back for the next. Okay. Rebecca?
I don't know if it needs to be removed, but the June 11th meetings have Xander and Henry's last names switched.
Okay, we'll leave them on. We'll consider those to be edited.
Yeah, I have it.
So any other removals from the consent agenda? Seeing none, all in favor of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So the consent agenda, less than two items, passes. At this point, I would ask for a finance committee report.
What do we need to understand?
I think they're termed for review, right? I mean,
Is there a discussion that's needed? I heard you say questions.
well, what is the typical process if we pull them to?
I think it would make sense, typically, because we don't do it often, but typically after you then would pass the consent agenda and then you would move right into those particular minutes to see if it's substantive
Okay.
or just typos.
Okay. Do we want to just take a look at them in order then? The board retreat
Which there,
of
board retreat.
June 20th?
Yeah, in the minutes of June 20th, if you look on, the pages aren't numbered, but number 8, item number 8, committee goals for 2014.
Yes.
The bullet points also have numerical itemization, but the numbers don't correspond with any numbered items in the minutes themselves. So I would propose that we number under number 7, the goals, so that they then correspond with the bulleted points in number 8, which have numbers.
Given that, I mean, is that something where if we just do that so the reference is done? that
That's
we-
not substantive.
That wouldn't be substantive so that we can,
Thank you.
I think, have those.
Can I
we
go
can-
on?
Yes.
Okay. Number 5, it says not a board level goal and drop. And there was also a discussion, and I think consensus, to transfer this item from the ITC committee to the curriculum committee.
Right, that would be substantive, I think, change it to, which it reflects actually what I remember the debate as well. Go ahead.
Okay. And then there was a discussion for each committee then to come up with, like, its like work plan or something. And I didn't see that reflected anywhere. Like for the year, like each.
Right.
I can't really remember the discussion that clearly, but I know we talked about each committee. That issue kind of led into each committee saying, okay, well then, we'll add that to our committee, and then, by the way, we need to each committee kind of come up with a set of, items that reflect the board retreat discussion, something like that.
Jill?
I think 9 is where it's attempted to be summarized, but it's maybe too summarized.
Yeah, it just said board calendar and topics.
With topics.
Yeah, there was nothing. But I think you're right, it would be under 9.
And so you would suggest adding language that indicates that each committee would be coming up with a yearly work plan as well? Would that be sufficient language?
Sure, if people agree that that's what the discussion was.
So the changes that you've recommended were,
I just have one more.
One more, okay, go ahead.
So a number, what would be number 3, but didn't get a number, on the 5th page, it says, in addition to defined budget preparation responsibilities, outline budget goals over 3 to 5 year time frame. That item, there's a set of bullets, and under forecasting, it says, let's look at history, and it says achieve 2 to 5 goals, and it says ask for levels, and it just says ask for levels. So there's
So
no.
you need to expand what that means?
Yeah, what does that mean? And then didn't become a priority. So there's just kind of either 2 comments here that make no sense to the public, which I would recommend taking out or explaining, clarifying.
I'm not sure I can. Ask for levels probably means the 0 to 4%, but I'm not sure.
I don't know.
So maybe we could also look at it with me and see if we can.
Yeah, I think given these, I would suggest we just
Take
take
it
a look
out.
back, work on a rewrite, and bring it back for later approval.
And then 2 items down below, which would be number 5, monitor and support implementation of one-to-one technology initiative. The substantive thing there was that the first bullet item, the plan for technology upkeep maintenance, one of the things I brought up was that one of my concerns that I brought up at ITC, because the items was under ITC, was training and a training plan. So that's when we got into discussion of curriculum. So I just wanted to make sure that the minutes track the request for a training plan that Paul was going to bring to ITC, but then the discussion at the retreat was that it doesn't make sense for ITTs to have a training plan, it makes sense for curriculum to have a training plan. So that training plan, just so we don't accidentally drop it, get lost, so it stays with curriculum. Thanks, that's all I had on those minutes.
Just do amongst, I guess, with the 3 of us and maybe further conversation with you, did anyone hear anything there that did not reflect what they remembered? If hearing no other issue, we would probably try to reflect that and then bring it back. Okay? So Liz, I think we'll work with you to get that done for that particular item, for those minutes.
Sure.
And then the diversity, the other set of minutes?
So the other minutes, there is hold on, sorry, let me just pull them up. Diversity and equity minutes. June 25th. Where did they go? There's a sentence with just 2 question marks after it.
10, the very bottom of the agenda.
So it just has 2 question marks
Right,
after it.
it just says
so-
this committee reinforces, and then 2 question marks, but I'm not sure.
So that was confusing. I'd recommend either just taking it out or clarifying if anybody remembers.
This is on the diversity and equity minute?
Yes,
Yeah.
June 25th.
Under
Could you-
item number 10.
And it's also about the December 19th Diversity and Equity Subcommittee meeting minutes that have come back to this board like three times. And then in these minutes of the meeting where we supposedly resolved it, which now it still has 2 question marks.
So I would really appreciate, and I've asked for this before, I would really appreciate exact wording. What should it say?
Well, if I recall right, there was some language that was suggested at this meeting, which I don't have a copy of. I thought the minutes were being taken.
Right.
That said that there was already, what I kept trying to have added to the minutes was that the Diversity and Equity Office was supposed to come back to the board and report out the proposal for their topics for the year for our meetings. And there was some discussion about that they had already done it. It was the Gantt chart, but some of us couldn't read the Gantt chart and had gotten it like the day before or something. And so maybe Henry or Nikki remember, because it was like there was pushback to what I was asking in the
When we
minutes.
asked them what they remembered, so, Liz, could you be specific? I don't have my minutes open. Could you be specific for me what should be removed and?
The specific references to item number 10 on the Diversity and Equity Committee meeting of June 25th. And so the last paragraph has a sentence that says, "This committee reinforces question mark, question mark." So I would suggest we just delete that unless someone can explain
I'm willing to give up.
what it reinforces, what.
I just think it highlights the importance of meeting minutes and that there have been issues with minutes not being clear or comprehensive.
I think part of the conversation was, we thought that what you had asked for December 19th was sort of already built now into the agenda for diversity and equity through those reports that Henry and Sparks and Nikki Fuller give, and Linda.
Right.
So that's what I seem to remember, is that we said, well, this is true, what you're talking about December 19th, but now is the issue moot because it's kind of built into the standing agenda for
It's not their monthly report, it's the calendar year that goes back to the retreat, that committees were asked to come back with a planned out agenda for the year, like curriculum has been doing for a while, where I guess there was some conversation about the Gantt chart might include that kind of timeline and what they're going to present at our meetings.
So
it wasn't the standing agenda reporting out their reports, it was something about timelines and different data sets.
Rebecca?
Can I make a suggestion that in addition to removing those last 2 question marks, that it says this committee reinforces that, essentially that the format is now in place with the Gantt chart, but it has not been in place up until then, because what you had been asking for was since December, but the Gantt chart sort of recognition is starting now, or starting July 1, or I think. Is that accurate, Jeannie? Yes?
I can live with it.
Okay.
that's what I remember.
Does that recognize the sort of
Yeah,
gap
it wasn't
of what
just the
wasn't?
reports, it's the fact that we had that chart now reflecting out the year.
Yes,
Right.
I recall that, yes.
It was all sort of, yeah.
So it would then read as how? This
This
committee reinforces.
That the format.
Moving forward.
Is now in place with the Gantt chart for the diversity plan. I added for the diversity plan.
Okay.
And should continue as such. 'Cause
How about it will be monitored throughout the year?
Yeah, we'll just have to make the Gantt chart visible for our next diversity and equity meeting. so we
Well,
can
and
read it.
I think since that is now clear in the board retreat minutes, that's now falling to each committee, including diversity and equity, to create that calendar so that everybody knows both from a financial standpoint, but also from an agenda standpoint, what topics are covered month to month.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Maria?
I don't know if this is the time to ask about general minutes protocol, but I've worked with some organizations where you have a minute taker and then you have like a second in command for the minutes. And so one person is responsible for taking and writing, and then before it gets published, the other person looks it over. And it makes the person who's doing the minutes want to do them more quickly, and then you have another view. I just wonder if we have any
Committee
protocol.
chairs traditionally are asked to glance at the minutes, but I'm not sure if these even came to Rebecca. I'm not sure if that's,
For that particular meeting, no, for the December one, it was Paul. For the one,
the
the
June
last one, you had a Google Drive open, and I was referencing it periodically, the question marks I just missed in the
Yeah,
moment.
Okay, so we do have kind of a second.
Yes, I don't know if
generally,
all committees do
we
that.
don't-
All right.
other than the official board meeting, we don't pay staff to take minutes at night. It's something that you could consider in the context of your budget. And so every one of our committees is staffed by one of our directors, and then I attend the committee meetings, and usually, so diversity equity is usually between Sarah Jane and myself to take notes, and if I'm talking, that's probably when things stop getting,
Yeah.
and I do it always in Google Drive so that the chair can follow along if they wish, and they can see it afterwards and before it's final.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I often share it with the entire committee during the meeting.
Yeah,
And,
that was, you did that when I called in for the last
Right.
meeting, that was actually. very
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, probably from the
It's
phone.
particularly nice when you call in because it's hard to hear, and so, and minutes are not really a he said, she said type thing. It's supposed to capture discussion and capture actions. I actually err on the side of capturing more discussion than some people like, but I also go back to them, you had a question today that we have to go back and research. So, it can always evolve. But I think the concept of opening the minutes so that the whole committee can see them at the same time might help improve upon
Yeah.
this. So I'll make a point of trying to do that. Just remind me if I forget. So, but I am, if I may, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
it feels to me as though diversity and equity minutes with what we just read could be approved tonight. Because I can make the
If that's a
changes
friendly
as
amendment,
approved.
right? Whatever, yeah.
Would you, one of you just want to make a motion then to approve the minutes as amended?
Liz, are you content with
Yeah.
the minutes for that?
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Graham, second by Commissioner Evans, to approve the June 25th diversity and equity minutes as amended. As amended. Any other further discussion? Joe?
I just, around the issue of minutes, not to drag it out longer, but that issue of communication was a huge issue at our retreat. And I think the minutes are a really important part of the way that we need to be communicating, especially if we're going to try to be more efficient and read minutes before we come to board meetings so that we don't report out on minutes. But, and I know we have a new minute taker, welcome, and
Yeah, no pressure, huh?
yeah, no, right, not to make your first night like whatever, but.
Okay, yeah, I may even take it as an item to try to get a bit more feedback from the board on this. We just took it down, hearing a couple different ideas to maybe put some other things out there as well. Anyway, all in favor of the minutes for the Diversity and Equity Committee as amended, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, those have been handled. We will still have the one set left. I guess at this point, it would be the Finance Committee report. With Keith not here, was there a member who was going to report for the committee?
Bernie, do you want to share those?
Sure. Well, the first item is a motion to adopt the budget development process proposed and amended policy DB to remove the budget timetable from policy.
Is there a second on that? seconded by Meredith. Did you want to speak to that or talk to what, and this is one where I'd ask the board also to make sure that could be versed as possible in this. If either of you want to speak to, the committee want to speak to that at this point?
I can start. I think now that it's similar to how Nikki now has observed a full year of hiring, I think David now has observed our budget process for a year. So he has brought to the Finance Committee some ideas about how we could streamline the process. And I also think that just personally, after having been on the board 4 years and seeing how it operates and seeing what happened to us this year with this sort of, the process, you know, sort of in November, December intensifies, and we don't always feel like we're getting the input that we need and that the public is really engaging with us. And I think you saw that play out this year with the sports and co-curriculars, when after the budget was voted on, there were people coming back and talking to us about that. So the idea was to engage the public very, very early on. I think you all, I wasn't at the retreat, but you've heard about this, that in each committee we would be discussing items and what really need, you know, really talking about the budget process. And David also had this idea about sheets for collecting information, with the process starting back, you know, backing it up all the way to August. Because in order to make, if you look at the timetable that's in board docs, there's really no way to get through this process and meet all the goals without starting super early. Otherwise, we go right back to where we were with scrambling in November and December to figure out what the public wants. And in order to change the process, we actually have to change the policy, because unlike a lot of other policies now, the policy for the budget actually has procedures built into it. So we would actually be going against our own procedures by adopting this process.
Effect of this motion that removing this particular sequence, that's really procedure. And so we take that policy stage.
Okay. Jill?
So the motion is to just remove that table?
Yes.
To remove that table, but also adopt the additional,
The other document.
yeah,
that
the
says
other
in the
document
plan.
as the process for fiscal August 15 at this point.
With the idea that we could,
But not as part of the policy, yes.
right, so from year to year, we could adjust according to, you know, what we've learned.
Yeah, no, I know, I
Yeah.
just, usually it seems like when policy revisions or suggestions for them come, there's changes made in the document
Right.
to look at, and this one looked like the original one, I didn't know what.
Yeah, exactly. Just take
Okay.
the chart out.
Miriam?
Is this time to discuss the motion then?
Oh, yeah, the
Okay.
motion's on the floor.
So the motion on the table is to take out that, to change that one part of the policy or take it out, and then to adopt the other, to adopt the new policy. So my suggestion is with the new policy, and one of my concerns in looking over it, I think it's a great policy. I love the idea of getting public input. I'm concerned that the public input phase is in August, which, as Jeannie was talking earlier about, public input in August is almost the same as no input. You know, we're not here, they're not here. And a keystone of this new policy is to get public input up front. And my fear is that if we do it in August, one, we won't get enough good information, and two, will create ill will from people who feel that, in a sense, we did it at a time when they weren't there to give it to us. So I'd like to suggest that we extend that. I don't know the correct date, but just I would say to extend the time frame of initial public input to September, to begin September 1 and end October 15th. Those are random dates, but I think that pushes us into a time when people are back in school, we can more readily get to them, and they have time to give it back. So that's one piece. I'd like to amend the motion to do that, if people would consider that a friendly motion. I have another
To amend the motion to what? We need the exact wording.
Where is the exact
Also,
wording?
budget, it's not
just
in a
to
policy.
clarify, it's not a policy. You
Right.
use the word policy, it's
Okay,
actually
new policy.
procedure.
It's a procedure, but it's in
Yeah.
there because we're adopting a procedure if we adopt this new time frame, correct?
Just a point of order here. The policy itself
Right.
is just taking out the timetable.
No problem there.
The process, the fiscal 15, is not adopting a policy. It's merely just saying, this is the process we're going to be
And
accepting the
are we
process.
voting
Yeah.
on that tonight?
So, yeah, both of them were in the motion. And what I heard you ask for was to amend. Now, I will also point out there are several other points in time in which there's public input. And the particular public input I think that's coming at the start is in particular to inform the committees as they develop and prioritize their program goals.
Yes.
And your suggestion was to have that occur as opposed to by August 31st. My understanding, I will have heard you to say by October 15th.
Right, but I'm flexible on the date. I just feel like we need to do it more when school is in session so we can get to people.
Yeah, Bernie first, and then Liz.
Just item B, no, item A, this motion is simply to remove
Well, that's the one I'm going to ask. There is no policy here. I'm not saying a policy. I'm saying a process.
Okay, I read it as adopt the budget development process.
but the process,
Yeah, we're not talking about a policy at all.
as I understand it, is more.
Should we be looking at this as two separate motions, do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I think
It's
that's
actually-
good.
Well, it's written as one motion, though.
It was written as one motion coming in. We can separate the questions.
Okay, maybe that's the
Let's
easiest
do
thing
that.
to do then.
Yeah.
The second part would be what?
Yeah, I think then, would this be appropriate to the motion maker and the seconder, that the first motion we look at is to amend the policy DB to remove the budget timetable from the policy?
Right.
Yes.
Okay, that's the motion then that's on the floor immediately. Is there any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor of amending policy DB to remove the budget timetable from the policy, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Let me just point out that's first reading for that policy, so we will vote on that again.
And can I just mention something? So
Yeah.
part of why we needed to get that here today is because it's going to slow the whole process down if we don't move that
Right,
forward.
okay, so
Yeah.
that part has been
Yeah.
done. Now, as far as the process goes, the next motion is to adopt the budget development process as proposed. Is that right?
And as amended, correct.
As a-
Well, right now, as proposed.
Point of clarification.
Yeah.
My mic's not working.
Yeah.
So I've heard that we have a policy, and I've heard that we have a process, and we just separated the two, okay? Right?
Yes.
Okay, so point of clarification, please. Where is the language for the policy?
The
What
poli-
is the policy language?
Policy DB, which is in the, is under the, under board docs heading under B, I'm sorry, policy DB annual budget. If you click through to there, the policy DB annual budget is right there, which is,
Okay, so what I don't understand is, I guess, why you move the process first. Why you ask for a motion on the process first? Because I heard you just ask for a motion on the process after we separated them.
No, the policy.
no,
You
this
just
is on
moved
the
the
policy
policy.
first.
You moved the policy, okay, I heard process. So you did ask for a motion on moving the policy.
Right.
Okay,
And so the policy for first reading has been passed to remove the time, just the timetable. Are you looking at?
but we didn't actually pass the policy, right? We just made a motion to separate the two.
We separated the two.
Yep,
And then the motion that we put forward was the following language. Move to amend policy DB, so we're amending the policy, to remove the budget timetable from the policy.
okay. But did we actually vote on passing the policy?
Yes.
That
what
was
we
the
voted
motion.
on. That's what
Okay.
we voted on.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
That's fine.
What my point of clarification
Yes.
is that I don't actually see a policy here. I don't actually see policy language. I just see a description telling us how the budget will go. What's the policy here? What's the policy goal?
Yeah.
And was there a policy
Different,
before?
different boards have written policies differently. This policy was actually written back in, well, the last reviewed, last adopted in 2002. So what the current finance committee brought forward was just the existing language, the format that 2002 board wrote for a policy, and just said remove the timetable because that's really procedure. So they didn't change any of what was already in
So
existence.
this was on the books?
That was on the books.
Okay, I just want to state for the record that I don't actually see a policy here, I just see a description of passing a budget. A policy is something that looks pretty different.
Right, and you'll see a whole gamut
Yeah,
more
let
policy.
let me just also say, this is also for first reading. Policy amendment requires 2 readings. And, I think the appropriate would be possibly to bring that back, to finance who brought it to the table at this point. Joe?
I was going to say, maybe instead of approving it for first reading, we send it, I was thinking to policy committee to see if our current board membership.
Well, we
would
already
have-
did vote. Now, what I would
They
have
can
to.
take it up anytime.
Yeah, they certainly can take it up at any time, and they can
Come back for the second reading.
look
in
at it,
June.
yes. And it still needs to come back for second reading at the next meeting.
And even if it doesn't come
No,
back in a
first.
different format, it can come back anytime after that.
I'm going to go Linda first and then Meredith.
One of the things the policy committee is taking a look at is exactly the whole issue of what's policy and what's procedure, and trying to make things more uniform and sort out and get out some of the policies. Policy in one place and procedures in another location. So that may come around and evolve it. You may see it again, okay? But that's going to be a longer step, right? Meredith and I have both said,
I just want to point out that part of changing this policy, this was not driven by rewriting this policy. This was driven by, we need to start now on getting this budget done this year. And by the way, our policy counteracts what we want to do, so we better get rid of that timetable so we can move this forward, which is why we had to, so it's not a perfect policy, and we'll come back to that. It sounds like your committee can come back to that and shaping that policy moving forward. Because if we do work on the policy now and don't get rid of that timetable, we can't move forward on our new
just
budget.
do it now and know we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
And then you can have a chance to say, oh, we remember this.
Ben?
So to use that as a bit of a segue to come back around to, I think it was what Marion was talking about on the process, what I would recommend is that in every section under voters where there's some kind of a meeting, which is probably every one of them, that we include in there, board or committee invites voter input, and actually have that in each section, so it's a proactive statement for the members of the public that will review this after it's, in the event it's adopted. And our intent behind that is something that perhaps can be incorporated into any policy that's getting written about a statement about outreach to voters for their input and why, et cetera, in anticipation of board and committee actions.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's meeting what you're saying, just to have that statement about board or committee invites voter input in each applicable little box down that column. If there's a meeting or whatever, it should say that in each one.
I'm going to take that sort of as less of a motion, but more just presentation. But I think Miriam has actually made something which is a substantive motion a substantive amendment to the second motion, which is that the due-by date for this initial voter input is extended to, and Miriam said she picked a date which is October 15th, and I would leave it at this point if there would be a second for that.
Wait. So, I'm sorry, can you restate what it is, what the motion is on the floor, and whether it's been seconded, and whether we're talking about a friendly amendment that needs a second?
Yeah, the motion that's been made and seconded is to adopt the budget development process as proposed, which is the budget process under point C, that document. And then Miriam has suggested, has made a motion to, I hope I'm framing this correctly, to amend the end date for the initial voter input section to October 15th.
Yeah, and I guess I would just say that I haven't looked to see if there's a ripple effect, that we then have to change other dates. But someone would need to look at that.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Liz, and I can speak to some, I mean, I usually try not to go into the discussion immediately, but I did have a bit of a discussion with David today about this. What would be the effects of changing some of these days as he built this process and brought it to the Finance Committee. And my understanding, kind of from his view, is working backwards. A key point, a key time frame for him is to be able to have Planning Committee have the broad program goals from all of the committees at this October 1st, at the October 1st Planning Committee, so that the board could be looking at all of the committee program goals at the October 8th meeting. I asked him about what does, how would that affect, and he said, in his view, it really would be kind of up to the board if they wanted to say, okay, committees, if you work through September on this getting input, he thought that would not change materially how he viewed it, but he did feel as if the process that he was looking at and that he had built up as he worked backwards was looking to have the board have those broad program goals in place at the October meeting. Liz?
I had a similar concern to Miriam's about voter input. And my concern, and part of my concern is related to some confusion, is that the public that has been paying attention is used to our old process. So the public that's been paying attention is used to kind of cluing in November. And what I'm a little confused about is what is being presented to the public under the category program goals, and do those program goals actually have a budget and numbers attached to them? Or are we going to end up, my concern is that we're going to end up in a situation where the program goals are adopted or recommended, and Planning Committee has the program goals, and there are nuances there that the public would have no idea are there without numbers. Because to me, program goals say something like, it's a goal to have a minute taker, whatever, that costs more. But the public, that's all very vague. And so then, I'm assuming there's just a much more iterative process of actually then putting numbers to the goals, where the public's going to start paying attention, because that's when people start paying attention, is when you talk about money. And that we're still going to end up talking about money in November and December, and that's when the public's going to pay attention, and that my concern is we're going to end up in a similar place.
Okay, just, David, could I ask you a bit to speak maybe to that question, how you might view the transition from helping the community perhaps pick up on the transition?
I've worked this kind of a process for a number of years now in a number of districts in Vermont, and it's always been a slow process to be adopted, but it has, generally speaking, been very effective. One of the things that I've done, can you hear me better now? One of the things that I've done is I've also prepared a number of background materials since the Finance Committee meeting, which address such things as there are 15 objectives for doing this kind of a process. Can you hear me yet? And there are 15 methods of how to do it. And there are 5 key values of the data that could be collected from this kind of approach. Getting to your specific question, though, the process built into here is offering the board more control over where they want the budget to go. By doing some initial investigation of talking with voters, and I understand that a lot of people take vacation in August. I understand that board members take vacation in August. I was a board member until March this year, so I'm familiar with that process. But I think what we're talking about in this process here is initiating a process that will get perfected over a number of years. I think some of the key elements of this process that protracting out the initial data gathering time will impact is for the board to have a chance at its committee level to review the voter input, the administrator input, the teacher input, so we don't have what happened at last budget cycle. We get to the 11th hour and suddenly there are large forces of people that come and camp here for 3 hours. And they make a lot of noise and it makes almost no impact on the budget. This is an attempt to get positive impact on the budget from the beginning. Now, in my experience over the years working with this kind of a budget process, people often will get anxious at the beginning. Well, if we set the goals, the financial goal or the program goals, are we tied to them? Are they cast in concrete? And the answer is no. On the other hand, they're also not frivolous. Even if you look at the schedule as proposed here, there are 14 days between the time when the board decides what its program goals and financial goals are, just 14 days for the administrative team to develop a budget based on those goals. That's a very, very short time frame. Is it doable? The first round will always be doable at some level. But I'm just wanting to caution against cutting out some of the process. Maybe in the first year, some of the steps will need to be cut out because there isn't time starting at this time of the year. Maybe we need to start in the spring. But I think it's important to read carefully through this document and see the way in which the board takes ownership by saying to the community, saying to administration, what is it that you want to achieve? And there will be no financial numbers attached to that. And purposely, because the purpose is not for people to start haggling over what it's going to cost, but to say, what do we really want out of our school system? Do we really want to be adding 3 more foreign languages? Or do we really want to be doing X or Y or Z? And one of the things that I've done in preparing the survey documents is make it very clear that members of the community are being invited to prioritize, which is to say, not simply add, it's not a wish list. These are the additional things we like to do. Public input on, I want this, I want that, could go on forever, and it will provide relatively little valuable input to the board. What the board really needs to understand is, in terms of the priorities of things, what things do people want to add, and what do they want to take away? A very important part of the survey document is identifying those priorities that could be released in order to take on the new, or a willingness to increase the budget in order to accommodate the new goals. So it's not just expressing voice, it's what I would call responsible voice, saying, this is what I really want, and this is how I would like to achieve it, rather than just give me what I want. That's what we hear quite a lot of in the sphere. This is a much more responsive and responsible way, starting over a period of time, inviting members of the various stakeholder groups to inform the board as to what they want, for the board to, through its committees, to dig down and say in curriculum, what is it that we want in the next year's budget? So we don't get to a situation of saying, oh, I didn't realize we were cutting out athletics in order to have a middle school health educator. That's what we got to last time, because people were asked to just say, what do we want more? We want more of this, we want more of that. Don't cut any of this. What this process does is to try to provide a vehicle for people to say, you know, we've got a good program here, but we need to tweak it up here, and in order to do that, we need to tweak it down here. That's what this is about. And the amount of time available is short, and we'll do the best we can with what we have.
Jean, you wanted to say something?
I'd like to comment on the process as well. Last year was a good example of how each year the public actually becomes involved in late November, as you said, December. after the board has struggled through the 8 hours or so you struggled through last year of looking at the 3 different levels of funding. And so all that initial thought of what's going into it, the public is not really part of those discussions. They show up at the last minute, and as David describes, they advocate for their own particular interest out of a context that you have to grapple with of everything. What I really like about this process is it starts bringing the public in much earlier. Doesn't finish it. So, the August date doesn't particularly concern me. I think August 31st might be a touch short, yes, because you, the board, haven't yet, grappled with exactly how you're going to communicate with the public. So it might end up being September 15th. October 15th would significantly have a ripple effect, however. But it's not the only public. It's starting, especially in this first year, it's communicating with the public that we're doing things differently. And while, things are still fresh in your mind, tell us now before we go forward. And then there'll be a chance for input again in October and a chance for input again in December. And so we're bringing the public along with the process as opposed to saying, okay, we were in the Hunt Library for 8 hours and 2 evenings and 2 public members showed up and this is what we came out with and now take shots at it.
Meredith and then Liz.
And I also wanted to point out that at our Finance Committee meeting, and Miriam did come to that meeting, we did have this conversation already about the timetable, but the Finance Committee unanimously agreed to go forward with this process the way it was. And part of it was a concern expressed from David that, I did express concern about people are often gone. I think this comes from a middle class perspective though, but people sometimes take that week before school starts because there's no daycare and no camps, But I guess I have deep concerns that if we push this even into mid-September, certainly October and late September I would not agree with at all, that we're going to then have issues along the way of, we're going to end up where we did before. And I've now gone through this process 4 times, and as many of you have, and that it is excruciating to sit there in November and December and come up with these decisions without having the information that you really need to make, informative decisions about what should be added, what should be cut. And it always feels a little arbitrary to me. I think Jeannie does her best to bring forward information from the district, but it always feels very last minute. And then what happens is we get in those meetings at December and January, and the loudest voice wins. That's often how the budget ends up being determined. And I think that this process is getting away from building more information along the way to help us make these decisions based on what the goals of the school district are on the board. But just to go back to that meeting, we did go forward with this process the way it was. There's one more point I was going to make, but I'll just leave it to.
So thank you, David. I'm relieved to hear that there's actually a mechanism for gathering public input, and I wish that David had been able to do this presentation first, because now my confusion is minimized. I was completely confused about these documents because it just looks like an open-ended process, but you've indicated there's actually a tool, a survey. So I would ask, so that's great, and I think that's really concrete. In addition to that, I would ask that voters see the fiscal year 14 budget as the baseline, because I think they need to see what the baseline is they're working with, to say, well, what do we have now, and what do I like? And in addition to that, I think voters need to understand what a level-funded budget means, because a level budget funded blah, 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 means cuts. So I think there's some key pieces of information the voters would need in order to use that tool, being fiscal year 14 budget, and what level funded looks like. Because level funded looks like a tax increase, as I understand it. I don't know when it hasn't. And then I think voters could say, well, given the fact that we're going to have a tax increase because level funded means a tax increase, then voters could say, what are the priorities? And to my mind, because I just think that's how most voters think about the budget. I think it's great, voters will have input the whole way. I agree, we could start in August, I don't think we'll get anybody, but I think if there's a way to indicate to voters, there is an actual tool, there is a survey that you can fill out in the comfort of your own home, that would make a real difference. If we put a link to the fiscal year 14 budget on Front Porch Forum, on Facebook, whatever you have, and other media and other ways people get information, maybe bring it to Partnership for Change parents and say, you know, we have this survey, here's the fiscal year 14 budget, here's what level funded looks like, please start to give us input and have it just be rolling, bring it in, bring it in, bring it in. You know, I just think you have to narrow the parameters because they are narrow. And as a board and as a finance committee, we're gonna be working with pretty tight parameters anyway, so let's define and establish and clarify what those are out of the starting gate. Thanks.
Linda, actually.
I just see this as part of this being really the process of we're doing a better job of communicating with the public. We have things like Front Porch Forum. I also think the community was a big wake-up call last year, and I think they're going to be watching. So I think, and the word will spread very quickly once it gets out. School opens when? The
28th of time? Is that right this year?
Yeah, so people are going to be back in town. They may be gone for a couple of days in there, but I think it's incumbent on all of us to put it out on our, it goes out by Front Porch Forum with Jeannie, but if we all put it out too and say, hey, they're coming up, that's one more time.
When I started, I had a second part to my friendly amendment, which may or may not end up being a friendly amendment, but my other concern at the Finance Committee, which I brought up, was exactly what the two of you are saying, that I think we need a process to go out and get that initial input. And I think simply, I respect David's has a form, and it's a perfectly good form, but we haven't talked about how we're going to get the form out. I don't know that it's written in a way that people who aren't familiar with filling in lots of forms can fill in the form. I think, I don't know if the form is written in a way so that, you know, we can cut off and get collated information. So what I wanted to suggest, along with extending that first time frame, is to introduce a more formalized process that's consistent across the city, so that if I happen to live in the New North End and you put something in your Front Porch Forum, but I in Ward 5 don't, I'm not getting equal outreach to the city. So I would like us, and I think it's the administration's responsibility to put out a plan for us to think about, or maybe it's a joint, a couple of board members, a couple of administration, come together and set out a plan that includes these things that Liz was saying and that Linda, that you were saying, so that we can do it in a planful way.
Going with the M&A, I think I hear two different things here, so I want to keep just sort of the initial date change first, separate from.
Well, it's the same, it's still an amendment to the motion, so.
Right, but I don't know that.
Do it two separate, I don't know if we can do it in two separate ways, because then you pass the motion.
No, you can pass multiple amendments to a.
Can you? Okay, well then I can hold it back, because my second amendment to the motion, after the first one being extending the time frame, and I'm not wedded to October 15th, I just think it needs to be a little bit further back than it is in the time frame, is to develop a process that is consistent citywide to gather initial input from the public on initial budget priorities. And that could be using David's form as the basis of it, but it would be a plan that tells us as school board members.
And Miriam, what I want to do is I want to keep things
simple.
Separate
Okay,
at this
I
point.
got you.
So let's go first with the particular date, and with the idea of extending the date, amending the process by extending the date of the initial voter input. I would offer up to you that my understanding is that we get into the October 8th date for the board, really having looked at the program goals. I would suggest that we extend the voter input such that the planning committee will be able to present to the board on October 8th the overall program goals. That's how I would offer that as possibly friendly to the date.
That works for me.
Was there a date that you said it?
No, but what it would,
I
there is
said-
no date, but it would basically be through September because planning committee meets October 1st. So it could be, it could be into September.
That's fine with me.
And
So I'm happy
Liz, you
to
were the
amend my
second.
amendment.
It's okay. And that would still just be on the time frame. That's the
Yeah.
motion right now on the table. We're going to get back to the second one. We will.
Okay.
Jill?
This budget process is presented to us in a memo form, and I'm not sure that we should be, I don't think we need to vote on dates, or that if we support the idea of the process. I think, obviously, since the meeting, the kind of work has been done by David that people haven't even had the ability to see. If we're agreeing in nature that this process makes sense, and we're gonna have to work out some of the kinks, I mean, the memo is kind of like, for your information, this is our new budget process. I don't know why we would be needing to
Could I
get
ask
in.
the finance committee to respond to that, because they brought it as a motion?
Yeah, because it's funny you should say that, because that's sort of what I was thinking with this motion anyway. So actually, when Miriam brings up, let's change the date as a friendly amendment, to me, I wasn't really voting on very, specifics so much in this. It's just the idea, a process that maybe you adjust over time as we
Right, and I think it just needs
start to
a
move
clarification from you that it in fact is a memo with an update versus this is your procedure.
Right. It is a memo, and I'm not sure that you actually need to vote on it. It is a procedure, but conceptually, I think having discussion and agreeing that you don't even have to vote or make a motion to agree is fine. But then everybody around the table knows that this is what, we did just take it out of policy. Well, we haven't yet. Actually, we haven't had a second reading, but we're moving to take the procedure out of policy.
I think, see, I read the original motion, it says adopt the development budget process as proposed. I sort of, you could amend that to say the concept of the budget development process as proposed. Because that's sort of what I was thinking anyway. I think I might have, Bernie, did you or I make the original motion? I don't have the minutes in front of me.
Bernie Meredith
Yeah.
made the original motion.
Yeah, so I think that was part of our conversation anyway. And just to go back to what Linda was saying, we did consider that with all this attention on sports and co-curriculars, that people are going to be paying attention. That was part of our conversation as well, is that, well, won't they be happy to know? We're asking them right now what they think about all this for next year.
Linda?
One other thing is that I'm not so sure we need to have the exact same thing all across the city, because different wards function differently, and I know what works in my end of town in Ward 7 is maybe very different than what works in 1, 2, 3. I just think that each board member has to take on that responsibility. That's part of what our job is to know our ward and get the information out. I don't think we'll have any problem getting people in Ward 7 to show up. They were the bulk of the people who were there before, but.
I think let me just quickly, I want to speak to whether or not a motion is needed. I think we are actually putting out there as a motion, in part because we want to make a statement, this is the process we're adopting, it's a change. And I think there's a bit of a public statement in that, maybe technically, we're not writing policy, so I'm not sure that you may be right on that, but to put this, to say this is a process, we've put out a document that's side by side, showing what the differences are, explaining to the community, there's an action we're taking. So I can see the logic for still needing to have the motion. I want to come back to your comments in a second, Linda, but I think right now there is a motion on the table that, in fact, one amendment to this process is to extend the initial voter input date through the month of September. Is there any further discussion on that particular amendment to the motion? Meredith?
And I'm fine with that, because I think you can do it concurrently, some of the other things that are going on at the same time, and you just can continue to bring forms in as you're developing the program goals. That's what I think it's a sort of a fluid process. This is our first time, right, David?
And then, then all in favor of that change, that amendment to the process, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so that extends. I'll come back now to you, Miriam, on your point about community, I will call it rollout, I'm not exactly sure what.
Okay.
And, that was what you were speaking to, Linda, but I will first, I guess, do you want to frame this as a motion, or do you want to make it as a comment to say, if we're going to do this, let's make sure that we're committed to, or how, would I?
I honestly am not sure. I totally get what Linda's saying. Not necessarily do we need the exact same thing in every part of the city. But I feel this is a new and different thing. It, you know, in the board responsibility before, you know, you sit and you listen to the public comment. That's very different than creating an outreach into your community to get information back in a way that the community perceives that you're doing it fairly. And we are the voice of the district in doing that. And so I guess in a sense I'm saying I think we're leaving a little bit to chance by just saying let's all go talk to our constituents and see what their priorities are, see how many will fill out this form. So I liked some of the ideas that Liz was coming up with. I might not have thought of those ideas. So, you know, I have my ideas that maybe some other people might not have thought of. So I guess I'm thinking it would be helpful to us to do our job if we had a bit of a plan. This is new, it is a change, it is good, but we also want to do it with the highest possibility of success. So I'd like some sort of plan to drive my actions in this period. That would be helpful to me.
Just, well, I guess I think I actually want to call on myself at this point. I'm wondering if that we might be asking, and I know you said the administration, and I wonder if it might be there's a type of plan that might come from finance to say how do we get this done through now in September as far as the rollout. I mean, would it come out of the committee? Would it come out of administration? You know, possibly. And Meredith, and then
Yeah, and
actually
I think,
Meredith lives, and then Linda.
yeah, what Miriam's describing actually already has occurred. Every year, we have a plan that evolves out of our discussions on the board. We don't just sit here passively and listen to the people showing up at the budget hearings. I think usually it kind of works with the finance chair, working with the finance director and Jeannie sort of to come up with how we're going to do that. But I will suggest, as Linda suggested, there are 14 members of the board. Everyone has different sort of knowledge and time commitment issues. Different boards have different feels to them. You know, I tend to use Front Porch Forum and just going into the schools and talking to people. But I think Linda's suggesting there are other ways that people operate. And I'd be afraid to prescribe something formally to the board, whereas it should be part of a conversation and a suggestion. I don't think we can tell a board member to operate a certain way. I think from year to year, we just tend to say, you know, send around emails and say, this is what I posted on Front Porch Forum, go ahead and use that if you want. But I think it's happened in the past.
I'll be quiet until my turn.
Liz.
So what I had envisioned is that, I believe, I guess, can correct me if I'm wrong, Jeannie, that there are standard outreach venues that you use on a regular basis.
Yes.
And maybe this is just a matter of articulating those for the record. That would be Front Porch Forum.
I think it's a timeline and making sure that we have a plan to hit all Front Porch Forums at the same time. And there's similar content, and then there's some variation on, based on the ward. I think that's very doable.
Yeah, I mean, what I was envisioning is that at a minimum, there would be Front Porch Forum, Facebook, your blog, and there may be others that you use. And I would like to see Partnership for Change committees included in the standard venues. And then if commissioners want to go above and beyond that and do their own thing, that's great. But I would just like to see a standardized outreach throughout the district, as Miriam said. And then secondly, I would like to somehow get people's opinion, if they agree, if there should be a link to a fiscal year 14 budget and a level funded budget and what that means for a tax increase. I threw that out there, but I'm really interested whether people agree with that or not. And if people do agree with it, how will we formalize that actually happening? And if people don't agree with it, then, you know, I would let it go.
I'm sorry, was that for tonight that you're asking for, whether or not we agree with it, or you're just asking to put that into the...
Yeah, as direction for
Okay.
this process.
Linda, and then actually I want to call on David, he had some comments.
If we go back to some of the things that the advocacy committee, policy and advocacy committee made up on the charts that we did, that if you haven't seen them, they are on the board docs. I think that could frame something that the policy and advocacy committee could come up with a list of things as part of our advocacy and just post it for people, and you pick your poison.
David.
I want to stress something here which may not be as apparent as it might. needs be. That is in the board column, is the emphasis on the work of the board as board rather than board as individual members. The very first box on the September date talks about how the 3 program type areas of the board, their committees, ITC, curriculum, and diversity, how they would have a primary responsibility as a committee, not as individuals, but as a committee, to make sure that they got the information in about the goals in their program area from administration and from voters. So it really is drawing it back to the board as such, and then the planning committee being the overarching group that brings together the various committees of the board. It really is not working as individuals running out around doing various things, although that can supplement it. But the heart of it is the board being board. I want to emphasize that, and that goes all the way through. And what's been said about program goals, not much has been said about financial goals, but there's a whole section here on financial goals, in which we're also seeking input from the various stakeholder groups in terms of financial goals. So level funding would be one option, meaning level program, meaning level dollars, meaning level tax rate, whatever you think it to mean. That'd have to be defined. Or there are various things. So there are these two tracks going on at the same time, looking at what kind of program we want to have for our children and what kind of money we want to pay for it.
And I guess as I hear that, Liz, I mean, as I look down that, could kind of, is on that part of it, like, you know, the 4th, 5th, and 6th boxes down or something like that.
Well, how are the voters going to know what financial?
You're asking basically, should the voters be looking at the financial goals as well as what you're saying?
Well, I'm just saying, if they take this survey tool, how are they going to know?
But if you take a look, the Finance Committee is inviting voter input on financial goals at the same time that program goals are being asked for.
I understand that, but that could look like Partnership for Change. I mean, is that just some open-ended, conversation? What do you want your school to look like? I mean, I feel like voters need a starting place, and maybe I'm missing something. But, I mean, if we ask voters what they want their school to look like, that's a huge question. So I'm asking what's the mechanism? The survey is going to direct them to kind of an answer that we can work with, not just like, we want 10 more schools that all look like the sustainability county or something.
Me, and I'm confused. I'm looking at you with the same look that you're looking at me with. My question would be, what would you envision on a piece of paper as you're picturing right now?
I would envision a front porch forum post saying, we're looking for voter input on the school budget for fiscal year 14. Here's a survey tool. Here's the fiscal year 14 budget with a link. Here's what level funding looks like. Your taxes go up by 2.3%. That's all.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah,
Yep,
because I
thanks.
just wanted to make sure you weren't saying, here's what might be cut if you
No,
have this
I just think
budget."
people need to know
Because
what they're
Right.
Part of
Okay.
doing
Writing
this
a survey.
is to let people
Yeah.
know,
Right.
just like we did last year, but apparently didn't get out enough. This
Right.
is what 0% is, this is what
Okay.
2% is, this is what 4%.
I mean, ideally, it would be a survey monkey, and it would say, do you want a 2% tax increase? Do you want a 3%? Do you want 0%? And what are your priorities in the school budget?
Okay, what I'm trying to figure out now at this point is what makes us comfortable to move the conversation forward, whether it's on this particular, to get to, the process. I think that I think both the board members as individuals, the committees, and I think the administration have heard a lot of input, all of which is good. And I think we should incorporate as much of it as we can. How much do people feel comfortable leaving, I'm going to say, out of this particular motion, would be my question, I guess. Because in theory, we don't really even have a motion on the table, but Miriam, I don't know if you still want to put anything further on the table.
Yeah, I want to have a motion on the table, and I would like it to be a general motion that says that someone, and I guess from hearing what we say, I'd say the Finance Committee creates a general process and tool that school board members, will use to gather initial input. And then what would come back is basically this discussion in some sort of format. It might go with Liz's way of having a standardized front porch forum with links to a survey. It might be David's way with the questionnaire with some ideas about how we get that questionnaire to our constituents and how it comes back. So that would be, so I would put a motion on the table that says, and I'm not sure about the
Direct
finance committee. Yeah, so to direct the finance committee, and I hate to give the work to the finance committee, but it seems like that's maybe where it should be. The finance committee develops a process, a citywide process that assists in gathering initial input from public budget, input from the public for budget priorities, and then, to include written information and a plan for dissemination, or something like that. I was mumbling a little bit. I can
Okay.
try it again. It's hard for me to think of it on the spot. Do you want to give it a try?
I like what you said. I would only say that we add something about the budget process outline, the new budget process outline, that it's basically the tools and the mechanisms for achieving
that.
those
That sounds
things
fine.
would be a good idea. And I think it is the finance committee. I mean, it's not unlike what the diversity and equity committee was asked to do in terms of coming up with a diversity and equity plan, which really was about the administration doing it with our support, sort of a collaboration partnership thing that then comes back to the board. And then we all as board members can help with the budget process. But I mean, I think it's kind of like working out the details of how we're going to do a new budget process at that committee. And then people who are interested in it can go to that committee.
Was that a second?
Well, it was a second with the addition of that supports the
fine with me.
the newly proposed budget process or something.
Okay, so the motion is on the table and seconded. And I'm going to paraphrase at this point, which is basically to direct the finance committee to come up with a, let's say, more formal written plan that includes a tool and a potential rollout, or a citywide rollout plan.
Yeah, in order to meet the new budget.
Can I try?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Move to direct the finance committee to develop a citywide process that supports the new budget process and assists in gathering input from the public to include written information and a plan for dissemination.
I don't think you need the last two clauses. Just stop before what it includes, and I think that does it.
Insists in gathering input from the public.
Public, period. That makes me happy.
And I'm just a little confused by this, because I thought that's what we were doing already. Because we came up with a budget tool, we came up with a process. The finance committee already is talking about,
Detail. She's really asking for the detail behind the process.
which
And
I
just-
thought was going to be part of our conversations moving forward in the finance committee.
So
I don't
maybe
really
you
get
feel as if
why-
you were already going to do this, but it's making it more explicit. I did ask Jeannie off mic, isn't this sort of already done or being done? There isn't a lot of additional work here for the administration to help the finance committee. She indicated that there wasn't a lot additional by what's been suggested here. It's just more formalizing it. I don't know, David, I would ask you also
I think I understand where members are coming from, and I have recognized the primacy of the finance committee in the Burlington School District operating for the last 9 months of being here. But this is really trying to say something different. It's trying to say that the program is not managed by the finance committee. It's managed by the program committees of the board. And the finance committee puts a price on the things that the program committees put up. Just as when I work as finance director, I don't go out to the principal or to the ELL coordinator or whoever it is and say, this is what you got for your budget. They tell me what their program is, and I tell them what it's going to cost them. And when the costs are greater than the sources of revenue, I say, well, there's an imbalance here. How can your program people figure it out? It's not for the finance director, it's not for the finance committee. That's my perspective, but it's obviously not touching ground here tonight. I would see the planning committee.
David,
as being a good bet.
I appreciate your vision, and it reminded me of the time when we actually did a very intense community-wide budget building process where we had neighborhood level. I mean, you could explain this better, Jeannie, but we had,
Are you talking about the one in 2000?
Yes, and
So that
that's
was the year I came right after.
Yeah.
It was done under Donna, and it was done 1 year that I was here.
Yeah, so it really was a community-driven, zero-based
It was-
budgeting
yeah.
process, and then we built it, and that's a very, kind of inductive process, and that's great. I just don't think we have time for that.
Right.
I think
It's not
that'd be
really
great if
efficient.
we planned for that, and that would look really different. I think that's incredibly open-ended and difficult to manage and costly, frankly. It costs money to do that.
Yes.
So I guess I was asking to dial back from that and come up with something very concrete that could kind of start to approach an inductive process, but I think that's a lot to ask.
And I would be more comfortable if the planning committee created it than if the finance committee did it for exactly those reasons that David was saying. And it's not about how much, it's about the process of getting the information. Planning committee makes sense to me because it has representatives from each of the key committees. So if the planning committee wants to take a stab at a process.
So you're amending your motion?
I would amend the amended motion.
Jill,
I would change finance to planning committee. That's fine with me.
Jill?
And I think it makes sense.
I shouldn't second if I don't agree with it, right?
What?
I shouldn't second it.
No, you can.
I'll second it, and I have a.
Okay, so you basically pulled, so the second is now Meredith. I just wanted
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, Jill?
What I think I hear is some confusion about the fact that we're not saying the finance committee should be the maker of the budget and the final decisions, that we are moving to a place where the different committees are more involved. What we're talking about is simply that the finance committee flesh out a plan for how to do this process that would have the four different subcommittees being active and equal players in it. The thing I don't agree with the planning committee is that the planning committee was formed, and I think the language in policy is simply to set agenda for our board meetings. And we have slowly been giving the planning committee more power and authority. I feels like things in the planning committee it's expanded, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, why wasn't that a board vote? Why was the planning committee doing it? So I would just caution that we go back to the policy,
And
make
Jill,
sure
I
that
think-
doesn't go beyond the planning committee's
Right.
function.
Jill, I'd just like to, with statements like that, I would like to know, or, I think you should bring to the board when there have been decisions like that.
One little example was adding an hour presentation at the beginning of every board meeting by the YES program or something like that. The planning committee decided to add that as a way to highlight great things that were happening in the district, but it wasn't a board-wide discussion, and a number of us felt like we already didn't have enough time to do our board business, and were there other ways to learn about fantastic things that were happening in the district. And I'm not coming down on it one way or the other, I'm just saying that's one small example, and it's like, wait a minute, that seemed like it should have been a board-wide conversation about how we use our time versus four people who are supposed to be preparing the agenda, which you could say it was, but just a small example. And I would be happy to bring other examples back if I feel that.
An alternative could be an ad hoc committee that we create right here.
I think we should stay away from ad hoc. I
Okay.
would actually just,
All right, I'll stick with
It's
planning. 'cause
planning and it has been
understand-
seconded at this
Yeah,
point.
I understand, Jill, what you're saying. Go ahead, you're on.
sorry.
Well,
Meredith and Leslie.
Okay, so the
And
reason
I would like to say, well, anyway, go ahead.
The reasons I like that idea is because of what you spoke to about all of the committees getting involved. Also, the fact that policy and advocacy is the communication committee in a way. That's one of their jobs. So if it involves communicating with the public, maybe it's good for them to be a part of it too, so.
Liz?
I appreciate staff's perspective on how the budget process should be driven. I'd just like to name that it is a staff perspective. As a board member, I would say, right now, today, this process has been with finance. It started with finance. We could talk about moving the process out of finance so that it would begin to approximate. Understand, David, you have a vision I appreciate, and I would like to understand your vision more. And I feel like, it's a great opportunity for us to learn a lot from you and how you've seen it differently in other parts of the state. My concern is that this board has had practices that have set the process and the budget in motion, and I'm not comfortable taking up more time to change that process. So now we're talking about giving the whole thing to another committee and having another committee meeting and having that committee then, have this same conversation that we're having now. So I'm trying to navigate a way that, I am comfortable with the finance committee taking this back. It was a first reading of something that is supposed to be a policy, and discussing again what we discussed here tonight, and then, coming back and making a recommendation. I believe that's the process for going to kind of the second iteration. With the comments we made, I would ask that we please not move this to a different committee at this point, because I feel like it's going to be August, and we're not going to have this wrapped up.
Joe?
I just gotta say, it's not a policy, it's a memo.
And-
We are, I mean, it feels like we are.
Joe,
I agree with you.
I think that she was talking about the earlier policy piece.
Yeah, the DB thing, which I don't think is a policy either, but people did think it was a policy and voted on it. But I would
No,
just say,
I'm
can we
talking about-
please,
I thought we were talking about taking this
the
memo
process,
from
can we
Jeannie
please
and-
send the
Bernie?
process back to Finance Committee and just have them wrap it up and move on into August, which will already put us like a month behind.
Bernie's asked to call the question on the amendment, which, as it stands,
Can we read it?
yes. Oh, but no, wait, so yeah, if you, basically, call the question on the amendment.
First you have to vote on.
Basically, we have to vote on calling the question. And so, calling the question for point of reference means that it would end debate on the amendment. And this is something that requires a 2/3 vote. So all in favor of calling the question, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so the question's been called, so the motion on the floor, the amendment is,
Okay, so the amendment is to direct the planning committee to develop a detailed citywide process that supports the new budget process and assists in gathering input from the public.
all in favor of that motion, say aye. All opposed?
You might need to- you
Okay,
might
so I
need to
guess,
vote.
we're gonna have to do a hand vote. All in favor of of the motion as read, say aye, or raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
All opposed?
1, 2, 3, 4.
And can I just, the qualification, I just don't think it should be the planning committee. I'm not trying to be.
A vote is yes, a vote is yes or no.
I just don't think it should be the planning committee.
And I'm coming back to
Please, so now the motion on the table is to accept the process as amended. Is there any further discussion on that?
Point of clarification,
Yes.
the process that Miriam read?
The process that's on the board docs,
7C.
This thing?
Yes.
yes,
it's been
that
amended two
process
ways.
that's been amended twice
As
now.
amended for the September 30th
It's been amended twice
deadline.
now. The two amendments have been the date, and then adding in the planning committee building the, what I'm going to call communication process.
And it's a memo that we're amending.
The motion doesn't use the word memo, Jill. The motion.
But I would like to point out that it is a memo from our superintendent, which may have been written with context from the meeting, but, this board has been accused, myself included, of micromanagement before. This feels like an incredibly long conversation about Jeannie's memo. It's been a long, drawn-out thing that I don't even think we vote on how she writes her memo. We could evaluate her on it.
Okay.
We could ask for things, but.
I understand, Jill, but
And I just want to remind you, I never threw it out as an amendment, but I did go and say that maybe the amendment should read concept of process, but then all these amendments got attached, so I was speaking to what you're talking about.
Ben,
I'm going to vote in favor of this. I don't think a vote on this was necessary.
Liz?
I would just say that if this whole thing moved to Finance Committee, that's not on this table. So this table doesn't reflect what we just did. Because we just moved this whole thing to Finance, to
No, we
Planning
didn't.
Committee.
All we did
Sorry.
is, all we did is ask the planning committee to put forward a plan for communicating to the public, as I understand it, in particular, this first phase of outreach to the community.
Okay, I'm sorry. So at some point, Miriam made a motion to direct the Finance Committee to develop a citywide process.
I changed that to planning, and that's what we voted on.
So we
And that's
never
what-
had this motion to direct the Finance
We
Committee.
never had that motion.
No,
Okay.
we had debate about it,
Right.
and then we voted on planning anyway.
Any further discussion on the process? So the motion to adopt the budget development process as amended, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
I'm abstaining.
confused. You have too many votes.
No, yeah.
All right.
We have not voted on the actual motion to adopt. We split the,
Motion
we
to
split
adjourn.
the policy and the
Second.
second. Okay, so a vote of hands. All in favor?
Of,
All in favor of the motion to adopt the budget development process as amended?
to amend the memo.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All opposed? 1. I guess abstentions? 2. Yes.
Student representatives?
Technically, they're not seated at this point.
Okay, sorry.
So, yes, it's a good point of order, but yes, they would normally, we do record votes of student representatives. And so, yes, thank you, Brian. Motion carries. Anything further from Finance Committee?
I hope not.
Policy and Advocacy, Linda.
Yes. All right. A couple of things. One, we did not meet this past week because we did not have a quorum. However, we did get a very interesting report presented, and it was from Ginger, and I've forgotten her last name. Farino, which you also got a memo about from Jeannie about the wellness program. It's posted. If you go back and look at the agenda for our meeting, and it's very interesting to see what she's been doing and where she's headed on that. And I would recommend you take a look at it. Also, the things that the Policy and Advocacy Committee has been working on as far as things that we're thinking about doing over the next year are also posted. I've forgotten what date, but go back and look at some of our meetings and the minutes from our meetings, and I think it was on the minutes we passed tonight that's posted. And that's it.
Thank you. Any questions for Linda? I did have one, which is sort of a generic discussion. There were a number of things that we had talked about, possibly looking at the retreat that more had to do with, I think this, the board meeting, which led to communication and just if those things don't have to be scheduled, but just kind of a reminder, we had talked about some pieces like that coming back to policy. Infrastructure and technology. Bernie?
Yeah, we met last week, and we also did not have a quorum, so there was no action items. We had an update on the Flynn School construction. It's going well. There's been some small change orders, but nothing that's worrisome. And also I believe they're almost finished with the installation of the solar panels, which you cannot see in the street. Then we spent most of the time talking about Joel and Mark that come up with basically a list of projects and needs that will eventually lead into a 5-year plan for the facilities. And they had them prioritized basically 1 through 6, or really concentrated 1 through 5. And so 5 years out according to the priority. And it was somewhat daunting. I mean, there's basically more money, more work to do now. We have money to do. And that did not include very much work at the high school. It also did not include it was a separate item, $1 million, so we've got security issues across the district. So anyway, I'm working with Mark and Joel in this and trying to sort of solidify the cost of a lot of these projects. Some of them, I think, carried enough money. And we also have to go back as a committee and talk about priorities. Well, it's going to be in the order that we've got it. So there's a lot to talk about in these couple of months. This 5-year plan. And another thing, they also presented our past 5-year plan, so from 2009 to 2014, and how far we strayed from that, just because of what happens, just things break down and surprises, and having to shift some of the money to Flint to finish that project. So you've got to keep in mind, even if we have a plan, it's sometimes you have to. Amy Mellencamp, principal, presented just an update on the work that's going on here at the high school as far as looking at major upgrades in this building. And there's a group that took a tour to, I think there was 3 high schools in Maine at similar size and sort of in the process of rebuilding or just had been rebuilt recently. And that was, there was some interesting things came out of that. So she's working through the summer with the architect and teachers and staff here, and also Partnership for Change as we move towards a report that's due in October from the architectural firm. That'll take just sort of indication where we are and where we have to go. Then in the fall, there'll be more specific planning done and programming. And with the idea that I think the target is still for November 2014 for this construction. And then Paul gave a report on a technology report, an update on the one-to-one, just a summary of what's happened since 2012, a year ago this summer, and various professional development programs that they've gone through and what they've learned and what they are doing this summer. So that's in the, on the agenda for the meeting. And that's it. Next meeting, we're going to take a look at, actually, there's also a policy and action, see about taking a look at policies for support services. And I did that. And there's a lot that needs to be looked at there. So I think we'll start taking a look at some of those next month, just to see. There's a lot of things that's called for in these policies. And then just also get to the point that what needs to be rewritten. Some work on the wellness policy. There's a couple items that we have to respond to on that. And then just continuation of the discussion on facilities.
Any questions for Bernie?
Just comment that's about work or not work.
Okay. And I will note there's a fair amount of information in that 5-year plan that is on their agenda for board docs.
Yes, yeah.
Worth, I think, having as a reference, because there's a lot of information in that document in particular. Patrick, curriculum committee.
I think most of what we have is in our minutes, so I don't need to add much beyond that, other than to say that one of the things that came out of the planning, not the planning committee, the retreat, was that the one-to-one is now moving into curriculum away from ITC, so that we're hoping Paul's going to come share a similar sort of information with us. And we met just before today, and consistent with the procedure/memo, we were talking a lot about budget priorities and how that follows with curriculum and setting, so that we can become more informed to put forward our budget priorities when the time comes, whenever that is. I'm confused now, so I have to have the discussion.
September.
It'll be in the minutes.
It'll be in the minutes.
Rebecca first.
I'm just curious what feedback you've received. There was a mention about getting community input about the STEM possibility, and I'm just curious what.
At this point, we haven't gotten community input from STEM. We're still I mean, there's been a little bit, I think, anecdotal there's been a little bit of anecdotal from folks that are talking to individual board members, but in any sort of systematic way, we haven't had that at this point. What we did is 2 meetings ago, Victor and Graham presented to the committee. At the end of it, we put together a list of questions that we have over the course of the next several weeks. We put a list of questions, and we're going to share those back now with Victor and Graham and try to get some response for the next, to try to think of where we go from here. And the questions range from why a magnet to specifics about STEM to specifics about all sorts of them. If you'd like, I'm more than willing to share, we can share those with you, the questions that were there.
I guess I have 2 sort of questions. One is a PR comment, which is, I have heard so many people saying that this is already a done deal, like it's already happening, and I've had to sort of help backpedal that fact.
The same thing.
And then the other is just to sort of recall history about how we got to where we are with 2 magnets already, and I just want to be cautious as we move forward that the implementation of 2 magnet schools was based on a particular goal, and we don't even know how successful that goal has been yet, and I would just warn us to move forward with another one until we have further clarified. I mean, anecdotally, we all know that so far so good with the 2 magnets that are in place, but round 3, if the goal is different, then that should be articulated. And if the goal is the same, then that should be articulated as well.
Yeah, so I guess a couple other things then to add on that. First of all, there's, from my perspective and the curriculum committee, there's been no decision made, or there's nothing that is a done deal. Now, I can't speak for others on the committee, I can't speak for others on the board, I can't speak for administration. To me, it's just fact-finding and getting information, and this would be a rather lengthy process before such a move happened. And I'm not opposed to it. I'm not in favor of it. I mean, it's just I'm ambivalent to the value of it. I guess the other part is that there has been a community survey. There has been a community survey that's been done. I guess over the phone. I don't know if there are other ways too, just to get some information. We got a call too, to get some information about whether or not people thought this was a good idea, the need for it, specifics about STEM. I haven't seen the results of that. I don't know if that's been correlated in any sort of digestible way at this point or not. We have all sorts of questions, and from my own particular perspective, I don't really have. It doesn't seem like from my point of view, not a done deal.
Jill?
I've heard that it's a done deal as well, but I would add to what Rebecca was saying, that one of our goals is to be data-driven in our decision-making, and we need data about whether, we've heard about the free and reduced lunch prices, the ratio changing, but what about student achievement? What about, some of the other measures? And I just had a question, what is the RTI model?
Response to intervention, it's a new way of conceiving of special education. Comes originally from federal level, but being understood in various different ways and interpreted in specific to Vermont with the MTSS, the multi-tiered systems of support. If you want a longer discussion, I can certainly do it, or Miriam can, or
that would be
Jeannie
great if you
can.
could send us some, because we're, the other email that you sent today, thank you. We should be thinking about this kind of thing as well at the Diversity and Equity Committee.
There's a document that's going to be posted, that's going to be available, Jeannie, the one we just talked about in curriculum.
Multi-tiered system of support.
It's kind of a lengthy thing, but it'll give you, it's going to be posted somewhere,
Yeah,
and you can read that, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jeannie, you also want to comment?
I did. Is this a done deal? Pretty much much any time that you begin to talk about something in the district, there will always be those who believe it's a done deal, but it's important that we keep talking. It's not a done deal. It's being explored. But unfortunately, if you want to explore publicly, you have to constantly reinforce that that's what we're doing. We're exploring publicly, and the survey is part of that. I haven't seen the results of the survey either. I also think, and I'm going to talk to Victor and Graham about this, but I'm going to throw out there that magnet school is actually the wrong term. Magnet schools were about a magnet drawing a population of students to the center of the city with the purpose of socioeconomic integration. Whereas the STEM school discussion is really about an academy or a themed school. And perhaps taking magnet out of our vernacular will kind of also help with that. Do we want a themed elementary school? It's not really about the magnet of social. We already have a policy on hand that says that we will attempt to be balanced across the city. So that's just a thought to throw out there.
Can I just have one little
Yeah.
comment? And I don't want to get into the sort of minutia of the language, but I just want to be clear that my recollection of the magnet school creation was not about socioeconomic integration. Socioeconomic integration was the vehicle that was driving the goal of increasing performance for children in poverty. And I think that's an important distinction. If we can increase the performance of kids in poverty without increasing middle-class students, great. And I think the more we talk about it as socioeconomic integration, the more we lose the prize. And I think we really need to very much focus on why they were created, not the mechanism that was designed to meet the goal.
Ben?
I'm just going to say, it's like, from the perspective, as Patrick said, that there's a lot of questions from the committee, and I can't speak for the committee, but from what I've seen, at least of the, stuff from me, is there's no done deal, because that's exactly what we're talking about, is exploring all that, the data-driven, et cetera. It's like, what's the problem we're trying to address? What different ways can it be addressed? So there's a lot of exploration to go.
I think that distinction of magnet versus theme school is important too, because I know there are other schools who are exploring as well. I've heard that at Edmonds there are parents and folks who have talked about possible themes for that school. So, and actually, yeah, but it's not formally. I think it's just people see what's going on in the other schools, and they think about what their sort of mission could be as a school. But as part of that survey, you were asked about other schools and where that, if something were to come about.
Patrick,
Yeah. So I've had this conversation at length with Victor, and good instruction says there's some sort of guiding principle in the school. And this is a discussion that the curriculum committee and other places that I've been pushing for, like what does it mean to be educated in the district, and there's something that unifies the school so that the teachers are on the same page, using common practice around curriculum, using common practice around pedagogy, and there's something that there's an end towards which they're working, be that sustainability, toward that integrated arts, be that STEM, be that any number of different things. And so I think, consistent with what Jeannie just said, is that this is the idea would be a themed school if it were to go that way, in the same way that in many ways sustainability and integrated arts are becoming more themed schools than they are, because of the way that attendance is determined. They're becoming, in some ways you could say, they're themed schools instead of magnet schools.
Can you clarify that? Because of demographics?
Because if I want my kid to go to a particular themed school, let's say every school had the theme, and I can still rank order which schools I want my child to go to, and theme could be one of the things that I would incorporate into the decision making. It doesn't mean that my kid's necessarily going to be able to go to that school, but that if each school were to adopt some sort of theme as a way to guide, and I'm not saying this is the direction we're going, but I'm just saying that it is have a faculty that's using common language, this is the whole goal of the PLCs, that you have a faculty that's using common language to address challenges within the school and to guide curriculum and pedagogy, the kids tend to do better, as opposed to you do one thing in first grade, first grade classroom next door is doing things in a completely different way, and they get to the second grade classroom and there's no common language that's been shared.
Anything else in curriculum at this point? Diversity and Equity Committee. Becca.
Certainly, I would suggest folks look over the minutes. Most of the content is there. The one sort of action that is listed here on the agenda was a first reading for civility policy, and we are actually recommending that it goes to policy. There's been enough questions outside of here people have raised, and many questions that came up even within the diversity and equity meeting, that it certainly makes sense that it get polished a bit and some language clarified. Does that
So
need to
you're
be a
holding back from
motion?
even making a motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
It does, so just saying send it to policy is enough, is that true? Okay.
You have to make a motion.
No, he's saying they
Oh,
don't.
I'm sorry.
Jill.
Withdrawing the motion.
Withdrawing the motion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just want to add, though, and it's not in the minutes, that I think I remember that Sparks and Nikki had a timeline that they were trying to get this fine. Okay. I just thought it was important for other people
Yeah.
to know,
But they also
considering.
agree that it's more important that the policy be right than
Okay.
having to be the timeline, because in the long run, we'll need it.
Right.
Okay.
And it's not just about sort of making it look pretty, it's about making it clear what is and is not a breach of the
Right.
policy, so that when it is implemented, there's no gray area, and that there's no ambiguity in terms of interpretation.
That's fine with me going to the policy committee. I was just wondering if you could give some background for those of us who don't know why the policy is being put out there. I mean, I just sort of feel vaguely, I've heard that there's like person-to-person bad stuff that happens, but that's all I know, so it's hard for me to support it without knowing why it's coming up.
Would you like to speak to that?
Sure, and hopefully it's in the minutes as well, because that was discussed at Diversity and Equity. But as we shined a light last year on issues around race and other equity issues within the district, as you know, whenever you shine a light on behaviors, you often see more rather than less at the beginning. And what really seemed to surface was an awful lot of adult-to-adult disrespectful behavior. The discussion had been about student to student or even adult to student, but adult to adult as well. And so the Diversity, Equity, and Community Partnerships Department of Nikki Sparks, Dan Ballon, Linda Walsleben, and myself have been talking this past year about needing to set a tone within the district and set a very explicit tone of respect throughout the district. And through a lot of research, even this policy came from another district, largely from another district in the country, not in the state. And working with our attorney, Susan Gilfillan, we were attempting to draft a policy that was a strong, explicit tone from the board level on through the district of the need for a tone of respect. We came close. It went to Diversity, Equity. We had a lot of discussion there, but discussion continued. Policy looked at it, and even internally, we said it's not really a doable policy right now, at least not with the staffing that we have. And it's not the intention of you have a bad day and you turn around and blast somebody because you had a bad day and now you get written up or you lose your job. That's not the intention. It's not a gotcha intention. It's really a statement, clear statement through the district that we expect from anybody involved with the district, that there is a tone of respect that occurs.
Do we have data on those incidents? I mean, that's what,
Well,
I've heard that before.
Well, interestingly, the policy preceded the data. So the data that we had at the time that we were writing the policy is anecdotal. in particular coming from Sparks, whose job it is to respond to all these incidents, as well as the HR department, whose job it is to respond to all these incidents. And he was just seeing a pattern that HR corroborated that happens, over and over. We did, at the very end of the year, the last 2 weeks of the school year, send out a survey, and we actually had over 60% of the staff participate in that survey and respond to it about issues of respect in a variety of protected characteristic areas. That data, that report is being compiled right now to be brought forward, but it was a very strong showing of response. I'm not interpreting the report for you right now, but it was a very strong showing of response to the survey itself, and that will give us more data. We did have many discussions about where this statement should come from, board level administrative memo, what should it be? And our request, the DECP department request, was that it be a board from the board vision on down. Doesn't have to be. It could come from an administrative memo from me, but the request from DECP was that it come from the board level.
Joe?
I was going to say, one of the things that's been fabulous since Nikki and Sparks have started, that's different in our committee, it feels like, is the level of transparency and their candid conversations with us. And each one of Linda, Nikki, and Sparks each do a written report that we get. So you'd have to go to our meeting agenda to get the documents that are being handed out. And actually, sometimes they're handed out at that meeting instead of, but they're very informative.
Just one is.
Oh, but yeah, and I know which one that is.
We're working on it.
But they're very informative, and yet they don't get at specific data reporting. But that's one of the things that, in that calendar of things we want to hear is we want to hear how many bullying incidents are being reported and how many formal adult things. But they've been very candid about how horrified they are at the culture in the different schools, and that it's different there's different cultures in different schools. There's one school in particular that's horrific, but they're seeing it everywhere, and they're shocked.
I mean, I personally would be really happier to see that data compiled before I could support a policy, because I feel like I understand they're shocked and they're out there, but I need to really see it to respond to people. I feel like, so that's one thing I'd love to see that. I'm glad it's out there. I'd love to see it compiled. That would make me feel better about it. And then I guess, I worry that to some respect, don't we have professional conduct? Isn't that we are expecting people, and that's in people's contracts. And that's, when people sign up to be a teacher here or a custodian or, that's there. So I wonder, it just feels a little bit like it's putting us at risk, because it is going to be a very hard policy to administer. I really, really hard. And even if we do what Nikki suggested, which was make it multiple events, if you're going to do multiple events, you have to track single events to know it's multiple events. And if you're not tracking single events, how can you get to multiple events? So it makes me a little squeamish. I almost feel like this is like, an analogy would be, I'm all for further gun control laws, but if we can't do that, let's at least enforce the ones we have. So I almost feel like maybe this is a case where we need to enforce the ones we have, and rather than create a new policy, which in a sense can be problematic. So those are just some of my thoughts about it.
Actually, only, I believe, the certified educators in the district have contract language around professional conduct and also licensing language. It's not universal throughout the district.
Well, maybe it should be. I mean, maybe that's a better way to do it, is to put in individual contracts as opposed to.
Possibly could, but you'd have to be opening contracts or waiting for next contract negotiations, and we have 8 contracts. I think the feeling from the committee from the DECP committee was, this can't wait. We need to start changing the tone of the district. Just information for you.
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot out of this, but it feels like a discussion of a policy of something that's not on the agenda.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I just didn't know. I'm afraid it's going to come to policy, and then there'll be the 3 of us on policy, and I'll be saying I don't like it, and it's going to stop the process, and I don't want to do that either. So I was just looking for more of that. Yeah, no, I guess that's right, if you send it over.
Linda?
Okay.
I also have to say that even though we're going to be working on a policy, there's absolutely nothing preventing us as a board and the administration are working on the whole climate issue, whether we have a policy or not. I think that there's something to be said for making a clear statement on a new school year, some expectations on professional behavior, et cetera, et cetera. And that's one thing, you and I are supposed to have a meeting sometime, was
Yeah,
on
and
my list.
I am joining you on Wednesday, so.
Okay. Tomorrow or the week
No,
from?
the next one.
Okay.
The next
But,
Wednesday.
But I think that just because you don't have a policy doesn't mean you can't start working on saying, this is our expectation. And it is across, at least the ones I've heard about, it's sometimes contracted employees, different levels of staff, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a more complicated thing. But I do think we could come up with something. Just say, let's play nice.
Sorry, Liz?
I just have a procedural question. At the Diversity and Equity Committee, we moved and passed a motion to bring the civility policy for first reading to the July board meeting. So procedurally, has it gone to policy? How did it get there? And are we bound by some rule to do something about this first reading?
You already did it.
We're not bound to actually vote on the first reading.
No, I don't mean vote on it. I just mean it's hanging out there, but did it go to policy committee already?
Policy saw it as well.
And so what
knew
did
that we were
policy
looking
do
at
with it?
They knew that we were looking at it as well, and now they're waiting with open arms.
So policy has the policy now?
They will have it.
It's on their
They didn't have a quorum.
It's on your agenda for your next meeting. Okay. And then will you pass a motion for first reading? Will it still be the first reading?
Yes.
Yes.
And you'll bring it back to the board?
It may come
For
back
the
to your
first-
committee too.
Just-
They may choose to send it back to your committee.
Okay.
It's not been read, it's not been moved at the board level.
No, I know it
Yeah.
hasn't. I'm just wondering
Yeah.
how it goes around committees if it was moved for a first reading to go to the board, but then it didn't, but then it went to a policy, another committee first. That was just confusing.
I think, in retrospect, what should have happened is when all of the questions came up at our diversity and equity meeting, we should have at that point said this should go to policy.
Okay.
But I think we felt, and as did Jeannie, very much the sort of pressure of Sparks and Nikki really want this soon. And so we thought, okay, let's at least get first reading. That will then trigger plenty of conversation.
Oh,
But,
so you can do both?
well, first reading is intended to then sort of get the board involved in the conversation rather than just
And
one
also
committee.
public comment.
I didn't
Because
realize
then it's part of
that.
our
It's
public
not just
record.
first reading, rubber stamp, second reading,
No,
rubber
no, no,
stamp.
I just didn't realize that it could go to both the board and a committee and be up for public discussion all at the same time.
Comes off the board.
So it comes off the board, what? Agenda?
It's not, yes.
So does that mean it shouldn't have been on the agenda tonight?
Well, it was on the agenda, but
Since-
but basically, it did not get moved. So it has not been moved. Basically, Rebecca said that the commentary and plus policy committee has said we need more work on this, so the decision was made not to move it. Ben?
I think, if I'm understanding your question, is what is the status and where does this policy, procedurally, where is it living? If it's no longer in your committee, hanging on your wall, then was there something that needed to happen to either the discretion of the chair or an act of the board to refer the policy to refer the proposal to the policy committee formally?
I just
Basically,
did.
so.
That's what we just did.
So that's
We
what you
didn't do it
did, so
formally,
that's,
but you
so I
did.
think that's
Right.
maybe answering your question.
Yeah, I just saw it go
was
from
just-
one
it
committee
was
to
moved.
another before it came to the board, which is fine if that's the procedure. I'm just asking a procedural question because I would like to see
It could
us
be either.
follow a consistent procedure so we know what to expect and not have it ping pong around to various places, you know.
Yeah.
Policies can come out of any committee to the board. Quite often, finance, for example, will update a policy and it'll come to the board. Or policies can either start in policy committee or be sent to policy committee. Or the board can pull it off a board agenda and send it to another committee. So it really is the will of the board when the policy comes forward. Diversity equity, at the request of DECP, identified a need for, or accepted an identified need for this policy, chose to bring it forward. In the process of bringing it forward, more questions arose. Policy committee, while they did not officially have it, they were aware of it because all of you are aware of it, and they said, hey, we want to look at this and we'd really like to get our hands on it. That arose. And so Diversity Equity Committee agreed to pull it off the board agenda because feeling like it was coming to the board too fast. So it was on the board agenda tonight. Well, Rebecca, as chair,
Yeah.
pulled it off the board agenda.
I'm fine. I don't think that's what happened, but it's fine.
No,
I just think
that's exactly what happened.
But I mean, it was on our agenda, but we still had a discussion about it. I don't want to be pedantic. I'm just trying to be clear about.
I think
It's a sequence issue.
Yeah, it's
not-
a sequence issue, and we still had a discussion about it.
Linda?
quickly, the bigger question is probably what I think Liz is addressing, is policies seem to have come from everywhere. If you undertake what the policy committee has been doing and read them, they have come from everywhere. They have no pattern. They look like a patchwork quilt or a bunch of dirty laundry, depending on where you're at the certain point. So they do need to be gone through, clarified, unified. There are conflicting definitions, conflicting statements. They're a nightmare right now, okay? So that's one of the things that we have said we're going to do, is read them over, try to pull out procedure from policy and try to clarify policy, okay? Thank you. Wish us luck.
Rebecca, did you have anything else from D&E?
I mean, I think essentially what folks should know is that climate and retention are sort of the two themes that continue to come up from Nikki and Sparks. Like Jill said, their reports are posted pretty reliably. The other piece, as you'll see, is that the Brown University assessment of the ELL program was done for middle school and high school, and those results, sort of the executive summary is, I don't think the executive summary is on, I don't believe the executive summary is, no. I think it was a summary. I'm not sure it was Brown's executive summary versus the interpretation of the executive summary. Anyway, the plan is to request that they do the elementary schools as well. It was too big to do all at the same time, but now recognizing the benefit and what a thorough assessment it is. Clearly, I think all the recommendations have already been put into next year's diversity.
No, that is the executive.
It is, okay, my bad. And then just clarification about what the advisory role for the equity and inclusion report is. As you may or may not remember, there was some rub about whether it's a board committee or an administration committee, or who is in charge and who places folks in those roles. And the committee established that it is a district advisory council with sort of, I won't create a verb for it, but sort of with feedback from the committee about categories of expertise that are needed on the advisory committee, but we are not hand-picking or hand-recommending folks to sit on that advisory council. We're not appointing, exactly. And that's it. And there's a meeting next week.
Any further questions for Rebecca? That is, I think, the last item on the agenda. I did have one question I did want to ask well, first off, I don't think that there really was any reason to have an executive session. I know of nothing that would necessitate the executive session, but I do want to ask, the superintendent, there will be items, I think, coming up for hires and things like that. Should we be authorizing, I would assume it would be finance by who meets next, the finance committee to approve, I guess it would be a consent agenda items?
For purposes of hiring.
For the purposes of hiring.
It would be helpful rather than waiting till August 12th, but
Okay.
totally up to the board.
I guess, Jill.
I think we already voted that that could happen. It was in one of the minutes that I had pulled up and I posted. I
But
think it
was
might have
it-
been at the
Yes.
retreat.
It was at the retreat.
No, because I wasn't there, it was
We
at the last
we
board
said,
meeting.
yeah, we approved it.
But was that, does that apply throughout? I can't remember the wording.
I thought it was for the summer. I'll try
Yes,
to-
it was.
Okay, if it's already been, and it was for the summer, that I didn't recall. It would have been the prior board meeting?
Right. It wasn't under finance.
It's possible, but you did just say July though. And that would-
Is it under planning? I'm not finding it on June 11th.
I didn't see it on June 11th either.
I remember hearing.
Let's check the retreat.
It's at the retreat.
I-
You must be dreaming there.
No. It, was there an executive session where we would have done it beforehand?
Okay, so it does, it is at the retreat, and it does say July and August. Thank you, Joe.
Okay,
And
good.
maybe we talked about it.
Maybe you read
So,
the minutes and
at this
just-
point, is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
First, actually, is by Commissioner Graham, second by Greg.
What? I didn't get the first.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Gonna pay for that, Rebecca.
Meeting's adjourned.